there's some real interesting subjects being touched on. One of the things that really, in a sense, didn't blow my mind, but still just seeing it written down was astounding is in the chapter essay, The Hurdles. There's a chart that you put up that shows from the years 2000 to 2007, the amount of money allocated by Baltimore Mayor Martin O'Malley to the schools and the police department. And while there were very slight increases in school funding during those years, funding of the police department was greatly expanded almost every year. And that shows where the priority is. The priority definitely isn't being put on educating and giving opportunity for people, young people, kids, to make it out of certain things. The priority seems to be put on funding these oppressive regimes that will keep you in certain things.
Yeah, you can tell they weren't trying to build young scholars. They were trying to lock people up. Like, they weren't trying to spend, like, he wasn't, when he went over his budget, he wasn't trying to take that budget and use that money to be able to create the competitive situations for young people to learn in. He was taking that budget to build like an army of super cops, and the result had just created a culture of cops. I was talking to a politician in Baltimore like not too long ago, and he was talking to me. He was telling me how nobody wants to be police officers in Baltimore anymore because they're being scrutinized too much, and it's just too much pressure, and this, that, and the third. And I'm like, yo, because you can't openly say the N-word because you can't beat people up because you have to use body cameras. That's too much scrutiny. Like, come on, dog. Like, it's the only profession where you have to wear a camera at work. Like, because y'all messed up that much. Y'all did that. The people that do that, I think you can be a cop if you do your job. If you treat people how you would want your family to be treated, how you would want to be treated, then you can work in that profession all day. But if you're taking a job just to knock people over the head and run amok, like, then of course you need to find a different profession. Go be a professional wrestler or something.
Right. Well, one of the things that I found fascinating about those statistics in that chart, even though you were showing what's happening in Baltimore, this is going on across the country. I mean, in Oakland right now, we're dealing with a situation where the Oakland public school system is in such a financial deficit. And even with that deficit, there's still mismanagement of funds going on that are making that deficit wider. So, one of the things that I appreciate about your writing is you give an example of what's happening where you are. And that example is illuminated because others can see that this is what's happening in my neighborhood too, here in Oakland. This is what's happening in this neighborhood here in Detroit. Through that, you're showing a connection.
And then we have a connection to local things in Richmond, Virginia. Right now, we're switching over from our loop to the Progressive Soapbox, and that'll be happening in just a moment. I want to remind you, this is WRWK LP-FM, 93.9 FM, serving Chesterfield, Henrico, Richmond, Goochland, Hanover, and Powhatan. And it's also known as the Work FM, theworkfm.org on the internet, and the Work FM on Facebook. We're streaming this live on Facebook, and we're also streaming it live to our YouTube channel on YouTube. Yes, anyway, and that will be under the Progressive Soapbox. And that's it. I'm switching this over to the man who really belongs here. I'm just rambling on. Here you go.
Hello, how's it going? This is the voice that is going to be in your radio hour. Not an elegant transition, but a transition nonetheless. Guys, I hope you guys are doing okay this evening. You guys are probably leaving work. And so I kind of want to be a soothing, smooth voice in the ear, the baritone voice that comes to your ear as you're on your way in your car, making your hectic trip to home to your kids or your wife or your husband or whatever else. And, it's this time period between that time. So I want to be this kind of nice voice to give you some news between then and now, not to mention, maybe make you feel better about your day, your world, or maybe make you pissed off about your day, your world. Who knows? Both of those things are perfectly okay if those things drive you to some level of action and thought one way or the other. So there are several stories that I want to get to today, including an awesome interview that's going to take place at 6:30 by another lefty. His name is Cal from Secular Talk, so that is going to be at 6:30. That should be a delight, because that wasn't something that was initially planned before I started doing a radio gig. So I'm pretty sure Cal will be okay. I'm sure the station will be okay, because Cal is an awesome, awesome guy. But let's start off with news. And one of those things with news is the local election. And I think all of us, me, have had an eye on the election, especially since the debates have been taking place. And, you know, I am not a fan of Trump. I don't particularly like Trump. I'm a lefty, and sometimes the things I say people are kind of horrified by if they're Democrats, but I'm a lefty's lefty, not a fan of Trump in the least. And that said, I get terrified when I see polls where Donald Trump, reality show host, the guy who has failed in one item after the next from the standpoint of his term as presidency, doing well in the polls. That does not make me feel well in the least. In fact, that freaks me out. Because, look, there's a few things that's true. If Donald Trump wins, if Trump wins next time around, what takes place is, A, most likely Democrats lose the House. Most likely. I mean, because how does Donald Trump win and those people say, yeah, I want Trump in office, but I'm going to put those Democrats in office with him? That's probably not going to happen. If Trump wins, they're probably going to lose the House. If Trump wins, they are definitely going to lose the Senate. And what is Trump going to do? Trump is going to turn around. Trump can win by one vote. Trump could lose by 2 million votes in the Electoral College. And the first thing Trump is going to get on the mic, he's going to say, mandate, mandate. I got a mandate. And now I need to get rid of Social Security and Medicare. I need to do all of that stuff that these neocons have wanted for God knows how long. And he's all going to say all those fires that have been setting across the globe, in Venezuela and Iraq, all of these fires are now just going to get worse, because the public has put Trump back in that office and said that all of those failures can now be co-signed with, you could say, I guess, the legitimacy of the American vote. Because after all, where does legitimacy come from the standpoint of our electorate? Why do these people who are in office have any level of legitimacy? It's the vote. It's the fact that the public went out and they put their names, I want that guy in office. And even if that guy loses by 3 million votes from the popular vote, that doesn't matter, because the popular vote is not what we use in the game that we call our elections. And by the way, even if they use 3 million votes, so what? That's California. All of those votes were in California. If you look at the map, that map was red. She got crushed. I hate to say that. I know Democrats hate it when I say that, but it's true. Her win was in California. Those 3 million votes literally all came from one state. That's not a win. And I got to be honest, you shouldn't have even been close to Trump. The guy's a reality show host. If we're being honest, it shouldn't have even been close. Don't say it to the Russians. Don't say it. Between Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, Clinton lost. Now, you can say Republicans were gaming the system. That's true. You can say Republicans were shaving votes in this Operation Crosscheck, interstate crosscheck. That is also true. All of those things are true. Blame Republicans. Don't blame the Russians. And it always annoys me when people do that. The polling for Trump looks strong. It depends on the polling, of course. There's some polling that has Trump up by like 1 point over Sanders and Biden. There's other points that have him getting crushed. But either way, it should concern you, to any degree concern you, that Trump is even close, considering his failures. I saw Warren's polling with Trump. She loses. I mean, and even when you're looking at Bernie and Biden, in most polling, Trump gets crushed. But every so often, you find polls where he doesn't get crushed, and that polling freaks me out. So the person who we really need to get behind, all of us, everybody, needs to get behind in order to make this work, in order to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get back into office, is John Delaney. John Delaney, the troubadour, John Delaney. John Delaney is the guy who spent $24 million of his own money to get into a Democratic primary to tell the American public what we can't do. You can't have nice things. Stop asking for nice things and stop supporting politicians who are trying to say that we can't. I watched the speech for John F. Kennedy. I love that speech. Have you seen that speech? You've seen that speech, Rob, right? The speech where he says, we're going to the moon. We do this not because, essentially, because it pushes the best of our abilities in regards to what we do. We're going to the moon. And I understand that John F. Kennedy was doing this for all sorts of militaristic reasons, but I don't care. I get enamored when I watch the speech. It is a Democrat saying what we are going to do, not because we can do it at the current moment, but what we're going to do. We're going to put our mind towards it. We're going to put our hearts towards it. We're going to say, this is the vision that we're going to use. And what happened? All of these kids, all of that generation is growing up looking to the stars to say that this is what we're going to use. We're going to have academic achievement, scientific achievement. We're going to have these things that we can do. It's something we can shoot towards. But no, Delaney gets on stage and says, you can't have nice things. Don't think about big things. Don't think about nice things. We have to have incrementalism. A guy, $24 million of his own money to tell us to don't have nice things. Is it possible that the fact that John Delaney could spend $24 million of his own money to do that is part of the reason we can't have nice things? I think it is. I think it is. And I think that kind of across the board. Oftentimes you have billionaires paying millionaires, journalists, and all of those people that you see on TV, those talking heads are not working upon their own. I hope you realize that. When Rachel Maddow gets out to do her show, when Chris Hayes, or all those guys on MSNBC, even on Fox News, when they're doing their shows, you understand it's not entirely them. There's a certain editorial control that's applied upon them. Not just that, they knew the person when they got the job. Whatever they're telling you, especially when you get into CNN and these other networks, they have a bias. They have a point of view that they try to espouse upon the world. You have to be very careful when you're listening to them when they have that particular point of view and don't tell you that they have that particular point of view. They are billionaires paying millionaires to go out and tell you that you can't have nice things. Don Delaney just kind of got rid of the middleman and just decided he was going to go out and tell you himself. The same thing was true for the guy for Starbucks. John Delaney. We all need to get behind John Delaney. So here's the thing. John Delaney went to a campaign event recently. Guess how many people he drew? Guess how many people? How many people you think he drew, Rob? How many people you think came out for that, that troubadour John Delaney when he was getting on stage and telling people not to have nice things? How many people you think he encouraged to come out to do that? 11. 11. 11. You're right. You should have been more generous. He got 11 people. The guy was on a debate stage. The beauty of that is, it's the public saying, yeah, I don't like that guy. I don't like that guy. I don't like that guy. I don't like him telling me we can have nice things when it's possible that we can't have nice. Do you realize the income inequality in this country is beyond anything that we've ever seen in the world. And beyond that particular point, we're talking about a situation where there's more wealth from the standpoint of the United States than ever in the history of the nation. We have income inequality, and I'm saying that to say that wealth has been expropriated to the very top. 95% of the wealth under the Obama administration went to the top 1%. That is extraordinary. And so when people like Delaney come out and tell me we can't have nice things, I say, what do you mean we can't have nice things? It's an issue of priorities. What's important to you? What do you want to prioritize? What's important? And I make the point that the things that should be important to us, all of us, when I'm talking about all of us, I am not talking about in the interest of the 99%. I'm talking in the interest of, meaning the 1%. I'm talking about the 99%. A government should be organized around the individuals within that government, not just a top 1%. And that's the way things have been going. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because ultimately, when we're talking about our elections, we're talking about who we want to put into that office. Do you not get tired of putting people to the office that you don't believe are representing your interests, or that you don't know if they're representing your interests, or you don't know if the money that they're putting in their pockets, the people who they're trying to get? Do you realize 75% of the time politicians spend is begging for cash? Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. 75%. Do you also realize 90% of the elections that are won by the side with the most cash? Don't blame me. Look up Washington Post. Washington Post even came out and said, oligarchy? Can we really say we have fair elections if 90% are won by the side with the most cash? Think about what that means. What you want in the electoral process, when you are disengaged from the electoral process, amounts to statistical noise. So when John Delaney looks into the camera and says, you can't have nice things, I ask, is Don Delaney telling me the truth? I don't think John Delaney is telling me the truth. I think John Delaney is giving me a perspective, his perspective, a perspective of the 1%. That is not my audience, nor is that the perspective that I am looking for. In this current election, I do have a point. In coming up, the CNN is having debates. In these debates, it's going to be a climate change debate. 10 people have qualified for the debate. One candidate wasn't going to show up. That candidate was Kamala Harris. Why wasn't Kamala Harris going to show up? Because Kamala Harris had other engagements, meaning bundlers and people who are going to put money in her pocket. This is awesome. I want you to hear this. And my larger point is this. At some point, all of us are going to get tired, I don't know why you're not, of politicians who are working not in your interest. They feed you. They parrot certain things. They have this kind of feel your pain language, as Chris Hedges would say. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when they do policy and when they enact their laws and rules and the things that they push for oftentimes are not in the interest of the 99%, and that they're shocked when only 11 people show up at Delaney's event. There's an enthusiasm gap. That enthusiasm gap, to some degree, I would get across to you, matters, especially if you want your candidate to get elected. Kamala Harris couldn't show up or wasn't going to show up to this. She changed her mind after people were shaming her for it. Kamala Harris also is pushing Medicare for some people. Is that what it's called? Medicare for some? Medicare for a few? Medicare for people with bad legs? Medicare for people with hurt backs? Whatever it is. But interestingly to note, I want you to hear this. This is Kamala Harris. Now, this is Kamala Harris when she was giggling on stage, advocate, Medicare for all, not Medicare for some, not Medicare for a few, not Medicare for people with bad backs, but at that point, Medicare for all. And, you know, I'm cynical about this stuff, and I don't necessarily immediately believe when people start talking about it, because my thought is, well, once you get in office, there may be something different. And if I don't necessarily believe the person has any level of credibility on the topic, I don't give them any credibility on the topic. And especially if there are people in the race who I do know support those particular items and policies that I am pushing for, then I have no reason to go to somebody who is sketchy. Intro. 1, Kamala Harris. Now, the people on the radio could hear this, and let me make sure that the people on the channel could hear it, because I want this. I mean, it's important. When you put people in office, you want to ensure that those people are going to do what they say they're going to do. It is vitally important. I want to flip this over so my audience can see it. All right. This is Kamala Harris, the guy who's standing beside her, ashen face. This one, Bernie Sanders. And listen to what Kamala Harris has to say here. It's vitally important.
If we're dealing with it in terms of early intervention, and certainly if we're dealing with it in the emergency room, it's too late and it's too expensive. Let's give the taxpayers of the United States a better return on their investment, which means Medicare for all. And why? Because Medicare for all stands for the proposition that all Americans from the day of birth throughout their lives will have access to health care. If we're dealing...
All right. Kamala Harris, Medicare for all. I'm behind that. I can get on board for that. Are you on board for that? You're good for that?
Yes. I'm behind that.
Yeah. I look, I am one of those people. That is my red line issue. That is my litmus test. I don't care if Satan himself is running across. I am pushing for Medicare for all. You have some people who have abortion as their main issue, saying it's an issue of life and God and all this other stuff. And they're giving a pass on that. In this case, there are millions of people. You know, the Democratic Party, when they did Obamacare, because look, when things are attacked and when things need to be defended, sometimes they tend to go overboard in the defense. And so instead of having a contextual explanation of things that take a little bit of time, they say it's universal care. Well, Obamacare wasn't universal care. There were 20, 30 million people who did not have health care after Obamacare passed. And even when Clinton was about to get elected, there were some states where costs went up 50%. Think about that. You're about to vote. Hillary Clinton says, vote for me. I'm going to be Obama's, second, the second thing of Obama, second coming of Obama. And healthcare rates are going up 50%. That is extraordinary. How do you put that person in office in that case? And when people have qualms about that, can you immediately say they were racist? No, there may be other issues associated with it. So Medicare for all, this notion that if you're born as an American, congratulations, you're covered. It's your birthright. We as a society evolve. And as an evolved society, we have the ability to ensure that each and every person is covered. We're going to ensure that each and every person gets covered, and Medicare for all does that. Problem. Problem. Kamala Harris, same person, standing beside an ashen-faced Bernie Sanders, got an opportunity to talk about this further. Kamala Harris was at one of her donor meetings, where people give her money, and she was schmoozing, and she was talking to the various people, and she's trying to get them to give her cash. And she comes out, she says, yeah, I have qualms with Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan, in which case she's not pushing Medicare for All now. She's pushing something else that's not. And she's trying to use the name and the nomenclature for it. What she is pushing is not Medicare for All. In fact, what she's pushing, she's not even being serious. She's talking about something that's going to take 10 years to implement, meaning if she gets in office on day one and implements her plan, she still has to defend it against Republican attack and everything else for another 8 years, which means the Democratic Party has to keep office for 8 years. Otherwise, they're going to be knocking the chunks out of it. And then another Democrat has to win after she gets out of office in order to ensure that they don't repeal it before that. She's not being serious. That makes zero sense. And to make it even worse, to give an example for Obamacare, part of the reason that those rates in Obamacare were going up 50% were because Republicans were taking chunks out of the bill when they were able to get control of Congress. So yeah, I don't believe she's being serious at all. Medicare for All is Medicare for All. And what she's pushing is not. This notion, the John Delaney notion, that we can't have nice things is ludicrous. Your country decided to literally put a man on the moon. Do you believe that John F. Kennedy had the capability to put a man on the moon at that very particular time? The technology didn't even exist. We're not even talking about something that requires technological innovation. We're talking about something right now that we have the skills and ability to do, providing we prioritize and do it. Medicare for All is entirely, completely possible. You just have to do it. There may be people who are part of the 1% that don't want their taxes to go up. I feel bad for you. I'm sorry. You'll be okay. Jeff Bezos can live with, let's say, $50 billion as opposed to $120 billion. Do you realize, Rob, Jeff Bezos by himself can get rid of all the poverty around the world? Literally. Literally. So I think they'll be okay. I think they will be okay. But John Delaney 2020 spending $24 million of his own money. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. So Kamala Harris will be at the debates coming up. That's somewhat of a news flash. Beforehand, she was not going because it was conflicting with her bundlers. But you can't really tell CNN that this date conflicts with my bundlers who are going to be giving me money, so I can't go. And it also looks extraordinarily bad when you back away from Medicare for All while you are literally talking to a bunch of people who you want to give you cash. Yeah, that doesn't look good. One interesting point for the article that I kind of want to bring up. Elizabeth Warren. At the very end of the article, it says, Elizabeth Warren is not in this milieu. However, they remember her, and she will be remembered. Now, here's the catch. Those people are going to remember Warren very well because after the election, if she gets through the primary, she's already said she's taking all the money she can get her hands on. So this notion of not taking cash is only through the primary. So think of that what you will. My question is always, why just the primary? Why, Liz? Why just the primary? If taking money is so atrocious to you and so horrendous to you, why just the primary? If you're telling me that you're only taking money through the primary, I'm going to start thinking something of you because it seems like you're only doing that just to get through the primary. You realize that there is a lefty audience that doesn't like this notion that people are taking a huge amount of money because it feels like and seems like, and they have a very good impression that favors are being done for the cash that is being it's stuffed in their G-strings and pockets. So fair enough. But if you tell me immediately that I am not going to unilaterally disarm, then why are you unilaterally disarming in the primaries? It makes no sense. Rob, am I wrong on this? Like, if a person says, I'm going to accept money during the primary, but I'm not going to accept it during the primary. I'm not going to accept big money. I'm not going to accept big cash. I'm not going to accept that stuff during the primary. But once I get out the primary, everything's fair game. Doesn't that look a little strange to you? I mean, when you think to yourself, why not in both times? It just looks odd. It's just really weird. It just seems like you're doing that just to get from point A to point B, and in order to kind of stand beside Sanders is saying, I too am not accepting cash. Here's the catch, though. Sanders is not going to accept it when he gets out primary either. So there's that. Before we go to the next story, Support for WRWK is provided by Affordable Home Inspection. With over 15 years of experience, Jeremy Rowan, owner and master inspector of Affordable Home Inspection, offers insured and bonded home inspection, including heating systems, air conditioning units, roof conditioning, electrical service, and interior structural elements, serving Richmond, Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, Petersburg, Williamsburg, and Alexandria. For more information, affordablehomeinspect.com. Excellent. So, we are, this channel is always on the lookout for underwriters who appreciate this content and appreciate a talk radio station, WRWK 93.9 FM, and appreciate ability to have talk radio where people can essentially talk and get across subjects that aren't necessarily talked about in normal mainstream media radio, and perhaps talked about ways that aren't necessarily talked about in either media or typical radio. So, underwriters, you can inspect on the channel itself. This is WRWK LP 93.9 FM Community Radio. So let's go to the next subject for the day. Epstein. I'm fascinated by this. Rob, have you been following this?
Yes, it's a very, very pathetic story about power and corruption in the U.S. and probably lots and lots of very wealthy people to be
breathing a sigh of relief.
Well, yes, it may have contributed to the fund.
That's the other point.
The bye-bye Epstein fund.
Well, they keep talking about this guy like he's in intelligence. And that's the fascinating part. When Acosta, Trump's labor secretary, the one that quit because, he was the one that gave Epstein that sweetheart deal, he kind of made this point that, this guy was above his pay grade, and here the guy was intelligence and all this other stuff. And none of the story looks right. I mean, this stinks all the way through, even to the ignoble death, the quote-unquote suicide.
Yes.
Whether he was suicided or, one of my subscribers, like, he probably was shocked when he found out he was going to commit suicide. Like, he probably was stunned. He was like, you thought you were surprised. You bet. I bet Epstein was shocked like nobody's business. Like, what? I'm going to do what? Yeah, you're going to do that.
That is dark humor.
That is really dark humor. But that's all you got. That's all you got, because all of this is utterly gross. Yeah. Just to talk about the latest on this particular case, because again, it's strange. And just to give a quick, succinct, brief understanding of what's happened to take place up to this point, in case you haven't been following the case. Multi-millionaire pedophile Epstein, who has all sorts of media and political connections and friends and so forth, was caught as a pedophile. Now, the suspicion, the rumor, I'm calling it a rumor, is that Donald Trump turned him in. Have you heard this story?
No.
That Donald Trump turned him in? So in Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, Democrats love this book because it goes after Trump full bore. But in Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, Michael Wolff makes this point that says Epstein and Trump were in a real estate deal, where essentially Epstein had a property that Epstein wanted. Everybody knew Trump was bankrupt, knew he was broke. And so Epstein was like, there's no harm in showing Trump this property. Trump undercuts him, gets money from the bank, undercuts him, and takes the property from Epstein. Now, he eventually is able to sell this for millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. Epstein is incensed. He's enraged. He's pissed. This pedophile is angry. And this pedophile goes and tells Trump, I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to tell everybody all these bad things about you. And what do you know? Epstein gets popped by the cops. Now, the catch here is that Michael Wolff makes the thing that says Trump turned Epstein in. Now, Trump supporters are like, yes, the mighty Trump. And I kind of made the point gently to them. This does not make Trump look good, because it makes it look as if Trump knew that he was a pedophile and didn't say anything until it got to the point where it was adversely affecting Trump. That is utterly gross. That is not something that you brag about. That's something that you like, that's not a positive thing. Either way, whether it's true or not, what's in between, what we do know is he did undercut him for that property. That part is true. That's a flat fact. He did get that property. Epstein was pissed off. That part is a flat fact. And them two were close friends. That part is also a flat fact. What we also know is that Trump comes out and at one point says, Epstein loves beautiful women, but he likes them young. And then you actually like, okay, what did you know and when did you know it? And by the way, not just Trump. Epstein had a lot of friends that he was in associates with. And the question becomes, what did you know and when did you know it? And was this an issue of class where it's like, okay, we're just going to keep this between us because, you know, we're just friends and everything else? And it goes further. Is it one of those things where some of these people were involved in this process? And this when this notion of intelligence services and all this other stuff gets into contact, whether he was part of the Mossad or the CIA and all, you know, it's like, what was he doing? What was he doing? What was Epstein involved in? And, you know, these are fascinating questions, especially since we don't have an answer to any of this stuff. And all of it looks extremely bizarre. So it goes further. Epstein is found in jail with Mark Ceramisnet and unresponsive. And the guy who's in the cell with him was a former cop who essentially had bodies buried in his backyard, literally had bodies buried in his backyard, and was caught with a phone like a week before Epstein got in the cell with him. They looked at the guy and said, what happened to him? He just went, you know, I'm not, nothing to do, nothing here. I have nothing to do with this. Don't blame me. I have nothing to do with this process. And so they put him on security watch, suicide watch, which is what they're supposed to do. The guy tried to commit suicide. And he is there. He is an ward of the state. It is the state's responsibility to make sure he gets to trial safely. Meaning if he tries to off himself, he can no longer be, let's say the crimes that he committed are in this plane of existence, and if he offs himself, he is no longer on this plane of existence. Justice has to be imparted here, not wherever he goes to. And so the state's job is to keep him safe, keep him alive. The state puts him in isolation. Good. Suicide watch. Not that I like him so much, it's more so that I want him alive because I want him running his mouth and testifying to whoever else was involved in this process.
Roll over on those guys.
I want all of it. I want him talking. And so he's suicide watch. Do you know how he got off suicide watch? His lawyers. His lawyers requested.
A curious twist.
His lawyers requested that he get off of suicide watch. Now, even despite what his lawyers want, his lawyers can want anything. I would imagine lawyers didn't want him in jail.
Sure.
His lawyers could want him out on, you know, walking the promenade, eating at McDonald's. It doesn't matter what his lawyers want. It's a responsibility of the state to keep him safe. Nevertheless, it is also a responsibility that before he gets off the suicide watch, he is supposed to have somebody to agree to it, either the psychologist or somebody to say, yes, he's not going to off himself. Fair enough. That never happened. And even with the suicide watch thing, he was supposed to at the very least be checked every 30 minutes, even if he wasn't necessarily on the technical suicide watch of 15 minutes. Never happened. There was supposed to be an inmate in a cell. Didn't happen. None of these things took place. And what do you know? The guy who tried to commit suicide ends up committing suicide. And he's hangs himself essentially by the drape or something, by his match, by his blanket.
What did he tie it to on the ceiling? I'm curious how they could do it.
I don't know how he did that. I don't know if it's on the bars. I don't know if it's on the ceiling. I don't know. But apparently he was able to off himself.
Lots of free time.
Lots of free time. Well, he did get a lot of free time. More free time than he was supposed to, saying every 30 minutes a guard was supposed to check on him. So the medical examiner comes out, Barbara Sampson, I think is her name. She says, okay, he has a weird break in his neck that's commensurate with more of a homicide than a suicide. Ergo, I can't really say anything about this. I need to inspect more. At which point everybody was like, oh! Wow. Now, nobody in their right mind thought he was going to make the trial. Most people didn't. We hoped, but everybody was like, there's no way that guy's going to be off. Nobody wants that guy alive. Like, meaning the public wants him alive. But media types, political types, and financial types, we want him dead. We want him dead. And I suspect he wanted himself dead. Here's another catch, another twist. His will was signed 2 days before he died. 2 days before he died. And he's leaving a ton of money, if I'm not mistaken, to his brother or something, where it's like $500 million, some obscene amount of money. Prosecutors and people who he abused are going to try to go after that cash, which gets weird now because there may be some people who try to go after the cash, even though they weren't necessarily abused, because every incentive in the world is for you to get your hands on that cash. And there's some people who are depraved enough to try such a thing. That said, some of the people who have been implicated in this, Bill Richardson, Bill Clinton has apparently been on Lolita flights more than one occasion. Donald Trump, not necessarily Donald Trump was implicated in anything messing around, but friends with him and associates with him. Not to mention Donald Trump outed him saying he likes young women and, you know, that type of stuff. Bill Richardson, Democrat in New Mexico.
Sad, yeah.
That Bill Richardson. Prince Andrew. And Prince Andrew on multiple accounts. Yeah, that's awkward. The Crown is like, oh, these are horrible, horrible claims. These are horrible claims. And then you see pictures with Andrews and the woman who's accusing him, and it's like, whoa, where did that picture come from? Where did the picture come from? And so Prince Andrew is in this case of, it won't me, it won't me. I might have been friends with the guy, but it won't me, it won't me. It's like, what did you know, Prince? What did you know? How much did you know? What did you know? And would I be entirely shocked as if some of these people saw Epstein with maybe young women, maybe giving them massages or something like that, and said, wow, she's hot. And he might have said something back to those people saying, yeah, you want something, a private conversation between men. That type of
locker room.
Yeah, those locker room conversations among plutocrats where they're talking about these young women who are like 14, 15 years old giving them massages and wondering if, can I get one of those massages?
Like they're toys.
Yeah. Literally. You heard the Charlie Rose thing, right? Where Charlie Rose gets popped for assaulting a woman in his office. Essentially, Charlie Rose has been on forever. Like people who are younger, man, like who the devil is Charlie Rose? Charlie Rose has been a mainstay in regards to talk radio. He's been around forever. And Charlie Rose, comes to find out, had been apparently abusing women in his office. Now, Epstein, find out, had a conversation with Rose where Epstein was like, Rose is looking for somebody, a secretary, and he says, I have the perfect person. This person used to work for Harvey Weinstein. This person we offer for Epstein.
Broken in.
Seriously, she's already broken in. The woman says, I was shocked when I heard that. She said, because I realized that I was a piece of meat. They handed me around. They knew exactly what they brought me into this office for. Wow. And she said the other women at the office used to look at me a particular way. And she said that's why they thought I was essentially the plaything that Charlie Rose was going to abuse. That's fascinating. And you wonder if Charlie Rose is in that black book, who else is in that black book? And what else do they know? And he's taken the stuff with him to his grave.
Well, I bet there are 1,000 people out there that are getting large payments or death threats as we speak.
It's like keep your mouth shut. Well, I would wager, Ghislaine Maxwell gets caught at an In-N-Out burger joint, In-N-Out, eating a hamburger, reading a book, the CIA, the Book of Honor, the life and death of CIA operators. Now, she's not at an In-N-Out randomly. She's there. She knows exactly what she's doing, and she knows exactly the book that she's reading, and she knows that people is going to be depressed, and they're going to be like, oh my God, this woman that was working with this international pedophile is now reading this book about CIA. And she knows that the rumors about the CIA and the Mossad and all this other stuff are floating around. That's astonishing. I'm enamored by this story. Yeah, as you probably can tell. I followed the story from the beginning because the story is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Human nature in action.
It's like power, privilege, and then you get to this thing of, how did this guy make his cash? Who knew about what his lifestyle? Were there other people that were involved in in these, these salacious, gross behaviors? All of these questions are falling out. But it seems like he wanted to off himself because, he set his will a few days in advance before he died. And not just that, again, he got his lawyers to give him space. And then the question becomes, how did he get the space? Even if his lawyers got what they wanted, he was still supposed to be checked every 30 minutes. He still was supposed to be agreed to let out. And there was still supposed to be another person in there with him. And none of those things happened. And you ask, how? How did that break down? How did all of that break down?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a rabbit hole. It creates its own rabbit hole where you're just kind of, did this happen? Did that happen? Did he, it's astonishing. My thought is somebody looked the other way. Somebody looked the other way.
At the very least.
Yeah. I mean, you can say gross incompetence, but sometimes gross incompetence is to hide other stuff.
This is perfect incompetence.
Right. Perfect incompetence. Perfect competence. The Epstein thing is weird, man. And so now they have 3 new accusers who are coming out saying Epstein did something to us. Astonishing. I don't know where I don't know where this case is going. I mean, I imagine these people are going to get sued. I imagine there's going to be another lawsuit. The feds have been releasing trove of information, meaning people still might get popped regardless of whether or not Epstein, or the very least implicated, regardless of whether or not Epstein is on this plane of existence. So this story is not over, as gross as the story is. And yeah, man, this there's so many questions that are raised by this. How far does this go? And not even just how far does this go? What does this look like? We have a section of our life and our civilization, our society, and everything else that we kind of go through. But the rich are not like us. They have their own world. They don't deal with regular airplanes. They don't deal with regular cars and regular boats and all that stuff. They have their own world that's almost corded off from the plebes and the unwashed masses.
Gated off, yeah.
Yeah, right, gated off. So the question becomes, what happens in that gated area? And I suspect that Epstein may be like peeling off something that's just gross aspect of that particular society that is kind of removed from where we currently are.
That happens to be a part of the society that's in power.
Yeah.
That determines our elections.
And all of those people are in power, by the way, like politics. Like he was on he was on like Foreign Services Commission or something like that. Like some weird, like bodies that are dealing with like foreign policy. And it's like, what does this guy have to do with foreign policy? This guy's, international pedophile. He has pedophile islands. They're like, what is like this case is bizarre, to say the least. And, the fact that Acosta was able to give him that sweetheart deal in and of itself is weird. By the way, he hated his jail cell. That was the other thing that came out.
Oh, dear.
Apparently, there was like vermin and it was a horrible cell.
Terrible.
And so he would spend 12 hours with his lawyers just before because he wanted to stay out of the jail cell. Yeah, he hated the jail cell. He didn't have a great life at the end. People
What a pity.
Yeah, what a pity. People like to say, oh, man, he didn't have the guts to kill himself. What does that mean? What do you mean the guts to kill himself? I mean, what are you like? I think of this like the Germans, like back in the war, back to World War II. And Paulus, in one of the situations, Paulus was in Stalingrad. He was a guy in Stalingrad. And he was supposed to hold the fort down. Hitler was like, hold the fort, don't surrender. Paulus had nothing. It was so bad where you had lice that would leave one person in order to seek a warm body. That's how, they had.
They die, yeah.
Yeah, they had dead bodies. There were icicles piled up because there was nowhere else to put the dead bodies. They had nothing. These guys were literally no food, no nothing. They were just there starving to death.
Clothes. Yep.
No, barely.
Freezing
Right. Freezing and starving. And Hitler's like, hold the line. It can't be as bad as you're saying it is. Now, everybody's saying Hitler was wrong. The catch is he needed to hold that line because if he didn't hold that line, the other Germans would have been kept in a pocket and they would have crushed all of the other armies. So everybody kept saying Hitler's wrong, but whatever. Hitler gave Paulus a promotion at the end because what he wanted Paulus to do was to shoot himself. Now, Germans who knew what they did to the Soviet Union, because that Holocaust wasn't just Jews, it was Poles, Ukrainians, Russians, so it was all of these guys who they were starving to death and putting in the death camps. Excuse me. He wanted him to shoot himself, and so he gave him a promotion. This thought being, no field marshal ever shot himself. Paulus says, I am not shooting myself for that expletive, and he surrendered. He gave himself up. But that's not easy because everybody knew what was going to take place. Like meaning those Germans who knew what they did on a Russian front, on the Soviet front, knew what those Soviets were going to do to them if they got their hands on them. And so this notion of suicide versus capitulation wasn't the easiest choice in the world, and suicide between the two was probably the better of the two options. If you're talking about bravery was to allow yourself to be taken prisoner by the Red Army.
See what happens.
Right, see what happens. I said the same thing for Epstein. You're stuck in a situation where, oh my God, there's all sorts of anal rape in prison. You have people who hate people who are pedophiles, like nobody's business. Like there's like murderer, axe murderer, the guy who ate his mom, and then there's pedophiles. And so all of those guys who are above that like to crap on the guys who's pedophile because think it's a
pecking order.
Yeah, pecking order. I might have buried all these bodies in my basement, but man, I'm never touching the kids. That type of stuff. And so I can now, in good faith, abuse this guy who's the low part of the totem pole. So it's not bravery to say I'm going to off myself because I don't necessarily know what's coming. And oftentimes the threat is worse than the actual thing. And I have a hard time believing that those guards were going to bend their backs to protect Epstein. Meaning whatever he was going to deal with in prison, he was going to have to deal with in prison. And I would imagine that is a terrifying experience. So between that, where you are a multi-millionaire, nearly a billionaire, have all sorts of contacts, have an island to yourself, a pedophile island all to yourself, and you have all of your needs met. Like, not just all of your needs met, you're considered as a powerful person and everything else. And for that, bam, on a whim. And the entire world has now seen this guy's a pedophile. And this guy's now in prison, and every condemnatory finger is pointed at you, and you haven't even gotten to trial yet. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be going for like a year. And the thought is, oh my God, do I really want to live through this? And so if it's between offing himself and enduring whatever is coming, I would imagine that enduring what's coming may be worse. I know this sounds weird, but people are like, oh, he doesn't have the stones to do it. You just said it because you don't like him and you believe that suicide is worse. That's assuming that suicide is worse. You have no idea what's coming up.
I can't imagine with that reputation going into the prison, especially into the population.
Yeah.
You'd be praying for solitary confinement,
Yeah, you would be. You know.
taking no showers.
Yeah, right, boy. He didn't take showers. He stopped taking showers. That was the other thing. He let himself go. It was like, yeah, he wasn't really taking showers and all this other stuff. It was like his last few days on Earth. It was not necessarily the greatest of situations. And I'll tell you this, I don't care. I wanted him alive. It was a responsibility of state keep him alive and to have him on that stand and to have him talking. And if you want to say, well, he had depraved mental capacity because of all the things that happened to him, so he couldn't make the choice and you need to make the choice for him to keep him alive, fair enough. Fair enough. I just want him alive.
Yeah.
I just want him alive.
We'll never see justice for that.
Yeah, that justice is no longer going to take place on this plane of existence. But you never know. Maybe he was, a spook. Maybe he was part of the Mossad. Yeah, who knows? All I know is the man is a pedophile at this point.
My first thought was, where's the body double?
Somebody else said that too, because my wife and I got into this rabbit hole thing of, how do you know he's dead? And it's like, oh, don't do that. It's like, how do you know he's dead? How do you know he's dead? That type of stuff. And it's like, do I know it's a flat fact? No. But do I want to go down that hole?
For that kind of money, I mean, you could do whatever he wanted to do. And obviously he could, or thought he could. And in fact, did for years. Whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah. And even when he got caught, I mean, the thing with Acosta, I mean, most of that day, he wasn't in jail.
And Acosta claimed that the state of Florida was going to treat him better than he did.
Acosta's lying.
Was going to let him go.
Acosta's lying. Acosta's lying. Akasta's lying. See, keep in mind, this is the guy that Trump put in. Trump lies flagrantly. How you doing, Trump? Like, how's it going outside? Well, it's raining. It's like, Trump, it's not raining outside, dude. What are you talking about? He's like, he's a habitual liar. He's
fake media.
Yeah, fake media. It's like, these are the largest crowds on the planet.
Don't believe your eyes.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, talking about fake media. So, and this kind of goes into the next thing, and I'll use this as a segue into the next topic since we're using fake media. Support of WRWK is provided by Affordable Home Inspection with over 15 years of experience. Jeremy Rowan, owner and master of Affordable. Did I read that one?
You did. I think this is one I really like.
Okay, let's do this one. Support for WRWK is provided by Thrifty Quaker, located in Midlothian Station Shopping Center at the corner of Midlothian Turnpike in Coalfield. Thrifty Quaker sells donated items to support the work of 12 varying, mostly local charities each year. The month, the Thrifty Quaker to support the Carol Adams Foundation. This month, the Thrifty Quaker to support the Carol Adams Foundation, whose mission is to provide emergency assistance to women, men, and children who are victims of domestic violence. Information can be found at thriftyquaker.com. Also, guys, I want you to give a heads up. This is WRWK LP 93.9 FM Community Radio.
Woo woo.
Yeah, woo woo. We are currently trying to grow and expand this channel, and we're trying to do this by getting underwriters to support this content. It's not just my channel. There are all sorts of channels where you have all sorts of brilliant, bubbling,
brilliant and bubbly.
Yeah, personalities.
Yes.
Who give you news, information, opinion, and sometimes just feel good stories that you may not necessarily get on other radio stations, essentially talk radio. So if you would like to underwrite this content, feel free to inquire at WRWK LP 93.9 FM. So we mentioned, or the subject came up about Trump and fake news. Trump came out screaming fake news, and the media hates that. They bristle at that. Here's the catch. Does he have a point? Now, not about him. Trump lies continuously. But I've stated before that I think this Russia stuff is nonsense. And when 3 years is spent screaming that Donald Trump is taking orders from Vladimir Putin, despite what comes up, meaning Trump pulls out of the INF missile treaties. Oh, that doesn't really come up on mainstream media because he's working with the Russians, and if he's doing it, it's just a ploy. Trump starts to put weapons in space. Oh, nobody really cares about that. I mean, missing the point that the reason why we have missile treaties and the reason why we don't put weapons in space, because the moment that you do something as a nation, I have to also do it. If the United States put missiles in space, what is China, what is Russia, what is India going to do? They have to put weapons in space. Otherwise, you're going to have a situation where one country is going to be able to dominate a particular region, and domination of space is the end of it all. For example, when John F. Kennedy made that speech about going to the moon, part of that speech, if you really listen to that speech, he's talking about freedom and democracy and all this other stuff. He's talking about that stuff in space. He's talking about the United States having a certain domination in space. At the time, it was a space race between the U.S. and Russians, and we wanted to have a certain degree of control and autonomy in space because that allows a certain military domination in that region of in that sphere of influence. If we put weapons in space, what I guarantee you is China is going to be forced to do it. Russia is going to be forced to do it. India is going to be forced to do it. These countries that are trying to have weapons that knock down satellites. One country get that capability. All countries are going to have to get that capability. Part of the reason for missile treaty is, look, can we just agree to not do this? Can we just agree to not do that? Both, we don't want to have to spend, $1 trillion to get technology to put missiles in space. We can use that $1 trillion for other stuff. Can we just agree to not do that? Some members of the Trump administration don't believe in missile treaties. John Bolton being one of those people. His thinking is, why should the United States, who has an economic and militaristic domination, give up that to any iota by agreeing to cut down on the number of missiles and so forth? And so, for the most part, Bolton is against those things. Trump has been pulling out of missile treaties. Now, if you ever listen to Russian media and you look at Vladimir Putin said on more than one occasion, this is not a joke, this is not a game, you guys are taking provocative actions, whether that's threatening Iran and the aggression towards Iran. Again, Iran is an associate of Russia in this case, was the threats to Venezuela and trying to topple that government. Trump has been trying to topple two governments, both of which are close allies of Russia. And the media doesn't look at that and say, well, wait a minute, doesn't this any way contradict our narrative? They don't do that. They just say Trump is working with the Russians, and the context goes out the window. Mueller comes out and says, we can't make a connection between Trump and Russia. The media takes 1 second on that point and then jumps to, okay, yeah. But was there any obstruction of justice? And imagine what we're talking about, obstruction of justice. You're talking about obstruction of something that Mueller just said didn't take place. And nevertheless, that's what they ran with. So for 2 and 3 years, they've breathlessly told us that Donald Trump is working with the Ruskies. He's working with Putin. TYT went so far as to say Vladimir Putin is literally telling Trump what to do and what to say in his foreign policy. It was nonsense. It was nonsense. For 3 years, nonsense. A conspiracy theory. Weapons of mass destruction was a conspiracy theory. Did the media ever come back and say our bad? Does the media ever come back and say our bad when it gets something monstrously, entirely, completely, devastatingly wrong? Wrong. As an absolute wrong. And so when Trump comes out and says fake news, the issue of saying fake news, it burns because to some degree you guys have been putting out fake news. It doesn't mean that Trump is not a habitual liar. He is a habitual liar. By the same token, you hurt your own credibility when it seems like stories that are being done with this notion of non-reality. Non-reality. Watching Rachel Maddow cry was the funniest thing in the world when Mueller came back and said it wasn't it. Did it stop her from continuously digging that ditch? No, it did not. No, it did not. Bernie Sanders has come out and said the media is not treating me fairly. He said the media is being unfair to me. The media is being wrong to me. It seems like they're biased. Now, here's the catch. I've made this argument before, but the media that you're seeing is not entirely from the person who's giving you the story. When you see somebody, a talking head on television, that person is being paid millions and millions and millions of dollars. They're being paid by billionaires to give you a narrative in the news. And by the way, the fact that they're millionaires to some degree means that they're somewhat separate and distinct from the life that you typically live. It is impossible for them to fully understand your reality in the sense because they don't live your reality. The pressures, the perpetual vulnerability that most of us, that the 99% of us endure, that's not necessarily something they endure. So the stories that they talk about, the things that gain their interest are things that oftentimes are off the reservation in regards to what the American public is interested in. There's a reason for that. They're telling you about their own interests. They're telling you about the milieu around D.C., around Washington, just the things that the talking heads talk about, not necessarily something that hits you flesh to bone. Sanders said they're being unfair to my campaign. Why are they being unfair to his campaign? Because the things that Sanders are talking about, healthcare, insurance, college, education, ensuring that Social Security gets expanded. So when people get older, they don't necessarily have to retire to this perpetual vulnerability or even worse, not retire at all and end up in a situation where they're working a full-time job, not getting paid a wage that they can live off, and still have a parent or somebody else that they have to take care of. I have an uncle. I have an uncle that is working. Now, if my uncle was getting paid $15 an hour minimum wage, something that Sanders is pushing for, something that they passed in New York, mind you, and guess what? When they passed it in New York, you know what didn't happen? The world didn't fall apart. The restaurant industry didn't fall apart. Those businesses didn't fall apart because reality is there is a sweet spot between the minimum wage where it can be lifted. Nobody's saying take the minimum wage to $100 an hour. But if you're working at Walmart, and Walmart is literally making $40 billion, the Waltons, $40 billion, extraordinarily rich, and will pay their people something like barely a little bit more than minimum wage, meaning those people are literally on government services in order to ensure that the Waltons gets their billions. That is atrocious. And often, you know, like understand what I'm saying. The Walton family has billions and billions and billions of dollars. These guys are like $40 billion. And they pay people so little that the employees oftentimes are forced to get food stamps and governmental services. Meaning you, me, us, the people at the radio station, the people who are listening to this, who are working, who are driving from their work week, are literally paying in order the Waltons to be billionaires, because we're supplementing the salaries and the income of the people who are at those places who are not making enough to make ends meet. It's not that the Waltons can't pay them more. It's that if they do pay them more, they will make less. That's the issue. And so, you know, if my uncle, he's not working at Walmart, but if he wasn't, if he wherever he's working, if you work, you should not go hungry. For me, that's a full stop. If you work a full day's wage, you should be able to take care of yourself. And if the minimum wage is so comically low where you can't, then that's a problem with the minimum wage. It needs to be raised. In New York, they were able to raise it, no issue, $15 an hour. Now, I know places are different, so fair enough. But I will tell you this. I have an uncle that works 2 jobs and has a grandmother or a mom to take care of. Think about that. Like, you're in a situation where you say, oh, God, I need to work. But by the same token, I am not making enough to live off. He is nearly retirement. Do you think he's going to be retired? No, he's not. He's not. That's somebody who's worked their entire life, gets to the end of their life after dedicating their mind, their muscles, all of their physicality and their brains into investing something within our society, whatever that is, whether that's, you know, bricklaying, whether that's pouring coffee, whether that's being a restaurant person, whether it's working at Walmart, whatever it is, the person is donating all of themselves in order to make our society work. And they get to the end of their life and they still have to work another 5 or 10 years in their 60s just to make ends meet. That's atrocious. There's no society that should be that way, especially American society where we're the richest on the planet.
The richest in history.
In the history of the planet. And so I see that, I find that to be horrendous. So when Sanders is pushing for those things have real world effects. But those aren't issues that media has. Do you believe that Rachel Maddow, who's making $20 million a year, $30,000, what, a minute or something? Well, I forget the amount, but it's some obscene amount, like $30,000 a day. Do you think she gets that persistent invulnerability? What about, you know, pick any random news person on CNN, pick any random news person on MSNBC. Do you honestly believe that they get it in a flesh-to-bone way, what it means to be persistently vulnerable? I would tell you they do not. And as such, it is not in their interest to do stories that Sanders are pushing for, because those are not their policies. Those are not the politics. It doesn't dig into them in that way. So Sanders said, these guys are being unfair to me. Now, immediately, media says, he sounds like Trump. Think about what they're saying here. My argument is that media consistently discredits itself. And when Trump says these guys are fake news, it's the discrediting that stings, not him saying fake news. You can say fake news all day. People always hit the media. The issue here is that the media, one time after the next, have done things that have found itself to be wrong. Like one story after the next when the Trump Russia stuff was coming out. When Joy Behar starts screaming when they come out with the media, where Cohen says something like, Trump told him to lie. And Joy Behar come out, we got him. She's like screaming at the top of her lungs, the president is going to be impeached. Yes, we got him. Like she's flipping out on The View. And then the next day, oh, sorry, we got that wrong. We got that wrong. You can't flip out like that and then get that wrong. And it happens over and over and over again. So, the media discredits itself. Sanders, in his case, saying that they're not treating me fairly, I can give 1,000 examples. 1,000. But I'm going to give one. Because this one is so atrocious that it makes exactly what we mean. And it's not just this. It's more than one occasion. The woman on MSNBC saying Sanders makes her skin crawl and saying that he's anti-woman. Do you realize the majority of his support is coming from non-white women? Do you realize that? Well, you're looking at the poll, what are these people talking about? They're lying. And then she said he makes my skin crawl. I think he's anti-woman. And then you have somebody else who seemed they can't get the polls right. And so they would like change the order of the polls. Somebody else is so weird. And this is constant. One person says Sanders should drop out to support Elizabeth Warren. Do you realize at the time the person said that Elizabeth Warren was literally in the 3rd or 4th place the entire way through? Sanders should drop out. He's only in the number 2 spot. Sanders should drop out. He's number 1 in various states, but he should drop out. These guys have a particular bias, but they were angry. They were complaining. How dare Sanders bring up this notion that we sound like mainstream media? So I was like, all right, fair enough. If they're complaining about that, if that's going to be something they complain about, let's give you examples. I'm going to give you one example, just one. I could give a ton of these, but I'm only going to give one because this one is so overtly atrocious that I think it makes my point entirely. Sanders goes out, and after he makes his point of saying, look, the media's not treating me fairly, etc., and he hits Washington Post. Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. I attacked Jeff Bezos relentlessly. And because I attacked Jeff Bezos, is it possible that the people who are at the Washington Post, who Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, is it possible, to any degree that's possible, that part of the reason they hate me so much and they give me so much unfair coverage is because I hit Bezos? Now, if you remember, Sanders relentlessly hit Amazon, saying you guys need to pay your people more. You only pay your people, and Amazon raises wages to $15 an hour. Now, they did other squirrely stuff in order to make that work, but they did. They raised $15 an hour. Sanders' point is it possible that Jeff Bezos and people who work at Washington Post of a particular class and orient themselves around the person who they know is the owner of the company? Because let's be very clear. Washington Post wrote 16 negative articles about Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. Now, if I tried to do that, I couldn't do that. And if somebody told them to do that, that would be a difficult task to do. That is astonishing. I mean, and it gets worse. I can name some of the ones. It's like Hillary Clinton's running for office. Bernie Sanders is doing something else. What? But it's a slew of those. But MSNBC and many of the other CNN says he sounds like Trump. Again, further discrediting. The guy who's saying, I want to give Medicare for all, I want to ensure Social Security gets expanded, and I want to make sure everybody can go to school. That guy sounds like the guy who's trying to do the opposite of all that. But media will say it with a straight face. He sounds like Trump. He sounds like Trump. He sounds like Trump. This is Brian Williams. Brian Williams should be fired. Brian Williams should lose his job. Brian Williams, liar, flagrant liar, habitual liar, Brian Williams, who lost his other job because he lied relentlessly. If you remember, Brian Williams was the guy who said, I was on the airplane when they shot it. We got hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. That never happened. Brian Williams is the guy who said, I was at the Berlin Wall when it fell. Never happened. I'm at the Pope. Never happened. Brian Williams is a flagrant liar. MSNBC allows him to be on their airwaves, which gets you this notion of how much MSNBC cares about reality that's going on the airwaves. This is Williams after Sanders kind of was complaining about the unfair coverage. These guys are now, he's asking the various people on the show. Now, you guys can't see this, but in order to kind of, get across whether or not Bernie Sanders is, just making stuff up with conspiracy theory, he brings people onto the set. He brings on a person from Washington Post. He brings in another person from Wall Street Journal, who Bernie Sanders also criticized in this very speech, and no, they don't disclose that. And yes, he was the person from the Washington Post, again, the people who Bernie Sanders was criticizing. And he brings on somebody else. I want you to notice something else that takes place here. This is Brian Williams, the guy who I'm saying should be fired from his job. Listen to what happens here.
From the political Twitter site called the Horse Whisperer. Okay, since this is trending, here's my Bernie story. The year was 2016, and Bernie was already long eliminated from contention. An actual Democrat would have stopped torpedoing the nominee and worked to defeat Trump, but Bernie had books to sell. The end.
Now, I want you to know what happened here. Just so you know what just took place and what you just heard. In a story that has to do with Bernie Sanders complaining about not getting fair media coverage. That's the story. Now, this story is ludicrous on its face right off the bat because Sanders is right. The media coverage, it has been unfair. And I can prove it. I've given voluminous cases, but take my word for it for the moment. In a story that has already ludicrous on its face, Bernie Sanders is complaining about not getting fair media coverage and that he sounds a bit like Trump. And for that story, they're now going to say that, okay, Bernie Sanders is crazy. In order to make that case, though, they bring on somebody from the Washington Post, and they bring on somebody from the Wall Street Journal. Again, Bernie Sanders has criticized both, so this is completely fair and balanced. And then he reads a tweet, random tweet. The tweet that he read was a My Bernie story, where he was saying Bernie Sanders was long eliminated for the contention and an active Democrat would have left. That on its face is ludicrous, meaning the tweet itself is lying. And I've shown the video from Rachel Maddow where she said Rachel Maddow was on, Sanders was on fire. Sanders went to places that Clinton didn't even go to, Wisconsin, for example. But think about what just took place. He's on the air, Brian Williams. He invites two people on, both of which were from these, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, both of which were being criticized by Sanders. And he reads a tweet, anonymous tweet, that has nothing to do with the entire story. That tweet has nothing to do with anything. My Bernie story, he just wanted to add that. The hashtag My Bernie story was trending that day.
Agenda,
to put it mildly. The My Bernie story was trending. The My Bernie story was people saying, this is why I'm supporting Sanders. And, people have put the hashtag and everything else. Brian Williams just wanted to add that in, anonymous. A random anonymous tweet that has nothing to do with the story that's taking place. Brian Williams decided to just throw that in. You know who that anonymous tweet is from? Because he's not anonymous anymore. A person who's an independent marketer that works with drug companies, multinational corporations, like what is it, Squid?
Patrol.
Like oil, gas, medical companies, insurance companies, all this other stuff. And then he freaks out like, how dare you dox me? You were an anonymous tweet where you were slashing at Sanders from the shadows, angry and pissed off. And so it's like, come on. My point is, this fair balance coverage had 3 people on, all of which were part of the organization itself, meaning all of them had a dog in the hunt. And not just a dog in a hunt from the standpoint of drug, like oil and gas, drug companies, and everything else, and the organizations and media companies were being criticized by Sanders. All of this took place. And fair and balanced. Fair ballot. That's astonishing. How do you do that? How do you do that with a straight face and say you're fair ballots? Why does Brian Williams still have his job? Why does Brian Williams still have his job? That's astonishing. That's extraordinary. And by the way, it gets worse. I've shown Ed Schultz. Ed Schultz is no longer here, but Ed Schultz made the point that part of the reason he was fired from MSNBC because he was trying to cover Bernie Sanders. He says, all right. He says, I really think. He says, I tried to cover Sanders. He says, it was a campaign rally. It was Sanders announcing. And I get a call from the president saying, you are not going to cover Sanders. Go down the block and cover that thing that doesn't really matter. And he says, what are you talking about? The guy's about to announce. He says, I don't care. You're not covering it. And the guy's like screaming at him on the phone and disallows him, meaning the host of the show has a particular point of view that he wants to espouse, and the channel accepts this. No. That's not just them. Ed Schultz, Krista Ball says she does a story, and she says they contact her and says, yeah, from here on out, any stories that you do need to be approved by us. Not saying that you can't do the stories, but it need to be approved by us. MSNBC. These are people who had ideas and points of view that ran counter, but it only ran counter in a sense. It was just to the left, and they were just trying to be honest. The show itself, the network, has a point of view that it tries to espouse, and its host espouses those points of view. Cenk Uygur also gets a call in saying, look, we need you to be less aggressive towards the congressman. I mean, they were complaining. And then fire him and say, we're going to bring you on. We're going to give you a lot of money, but we just want you on as as an announcer that comes in every so often. Now, he says, God, man, the money is so good. And he says, like the airplane pickups, he says, all of those things are so enticing. Like he says, and, it gives you this thing of, all right, maybe I can work between the lines and maybe I can be an incrementalist. Right. You're co-opted into this notion of, all right, well, I'm making $20 million. I'm doing really good. I mean, these guys are picking me up from the airport. I mean, the only thing I have to do is not do what I want to do. That's all. I just got to not be a human being.
That's all.
That's all. My point is this. Don't look at these channels as if what they're telling you are entirely coming from the hosts. That's all. The hosts are managed. The hosts have to be managed. And there's multiple, people who come out that world who say, yes, what I wanted to do to some degree was curtailed by what the network also wanted. And this is not just any network. If you went on RT, I would imagine you can't go on RT and denigrate, the Russian campaign, the Great Patriotic War. That would be a fail. All networks have their biases. I think my issue is the pretending that bias doesn't exist. And that's the thing that always annoys me when talking about MSNBC. Look, they're pushing Elizabeth Warren, whole hog. That is their candidate. That is the person they're pushing. Biden is going to flame out. And when Biden flames out, they're going to go full bore for Warren. And they're already doing it now. So that's, I'm enamored by what goes on MSNBC. But to be honest, I find the network to be a propaganda outlet every so much as Fox News. So it's just now, we're in a situation where Trump is in office and they're flipping out and it's kind of derangement thing. Fox News was saying when Obama was in office, he's a Kenyan, he's a Muslim, he's a this, he's a that. They're just losing it, entirely losing it. So let me read through this one just so we
The shows.
Yeah, just so we're
Mention the shows.
saying who's underwriting in some of the other shows here. So guys, if you dig this content, WRWK 93.9 FM community radio, we have several shows here that have various voices. Citizen Voices with Jay, that happens at 2 p.m. on Sunday. Monday, we have In the Frequency of Hope with Stephanie. I was on that show. Stephanie is awesome. On Wednesday, we have HER. Every other Wednesday, Human Equal Rights. That's with Leslie at 7 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
On Thursday, we have...
left out Tuesday.
Oh, I didn't say anything for Tuesday. Oh, me. That's me. That's me. That's me. Let me write this in. Me. All right, me for Tuesday. For Thursday, Richmond Business Babes. That's interesting.
And
Self-care
activists.
That's interesting. What is Richmond Business Babes?
Is
it what it sounds like?
Yes, it's a woman who introduces women who have businesses in the area and just talks. It's only an hour long. It's very good, and it's about women-owned businesses in Richmond.
She's being sexist. That term babes.
I know.
How dare she?
I cringed at that name. And she said, "No, that's what I want to call it."
I'm teasing. I'm not an identitarian. That's what does bother me. Critiques for, I had a guy that I was working with. Democrats always trip me out with that stuff because they would be like, they would say with a straight face, yeah, we should be able to make as much cash as we can, forgetting the fact that if you're making that much cash, you're expropriating that wealth from somewhere. You're not making it out of thin air. Whether that's from your workers, that you could be paying them a bit more, whether that's from the products that you get. It's a capitalistic system. It's the way it is.
You take your cut and it goes by.
You take your cut. And so he's like, yeah, I think people should be able to make as much as they possibly can make. If Jeff Bezos can make $1 trillion, and Jeff Bezos should be able to make $1 trillion. But I don't like the term like babes, or I don't think you should say this or that. Like it's like they're really interesting in the wording. Like they love this notion of curtailing the way people talk in these very particular ways. But when you get into real things like economics, whoa, keep your hands off the wallet, keep your hands off the wallet. They're entirely identitarians. It's fascinating. And it's like, you got to make this point like, yeah, dude, I'm not really an identitarian. I mean, you have to defend identity to a certain degree, I mean, subjective to some degree. Like, you can't have somebody being brutally racist and sexist, without saying anything. By the same token, there's some things that are extraordinarily subjective, that between matters of economics, where I can ensure that we have enough cash to pay for healthcare, enough cash to pay for Social Security expansions, enough cash to pay for public services. That means that you may not make $1 trillion. That means that there's going to be something that is given back to the society itself that you are using to make those billions of dollars. It's just, if you want a society, you got to pay for it. It's just, it's what it is. But they were, with a straight face, I think they should keep their hands above wages, but I don't think you should say that word or that word or that word. It's astonishing. I want to correct the language, but I don't want to deal with the real issues that get into people's wallets and make people's lives better. And so for the last one, critiques for of the culture. Culture, okay. Critiques for the culture.
That's a rerun from WRIR, our sister station up in Richmond.
Yeah.
It's very good. A couple of ladies talk about cultural, some usually movies that go on and how they think the movie does projecting what's really going on. And
oh, that's fascinating.
Oh, it's very good, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Do they get into sci-fi?
Pardon?
Do they get into sci-fi?
No, this is strictly, it's mostly social commentary on movies that have a social content.
Star Trek does have social content. Star Trek, like, if you were so for example, if you were talking about, let's say, I mean, you and I were talking about Deep Space Nine. We were running our mouth earlier about Deep Space Nine. But but Deep Space Nine, perfect example. Oh, perfect example. So we have a society where we've been at war for 20 years, give or take.
Oh, God.
I mean, for a long
Good
time.
Prophet Center. You mean the Prophet Center over there in Afghanistan and the
Yeah.
other one over in...
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
I mean, we're literally in, I think it was like 70% of the world is occupied by U.S. military in some way, either a military base or a military presence. Something like that. Some obscene amount of the world, like the countries. And just even if you're just going by the Afghanistan war, when Bush invaded that country, we've been over the country for years. It's like been 20 years. I mean, if you're 16 years old, your country's been at war for the entire time.
Mhm.
And we were talking about the Deep Space Nine thing, where Cisco is having a conversation with this guy on Earth, and and Cisco is kind of pissed off, saying that he doesn't understand what takes place out here along the border regions and that type of stuff, and how difficult it is and how dangerous. Art does reflect culture. Like, for a perfect example, I went to GalaxyCon, and when my wife and I were at GalaxyCon, I was able to meet Worf. Worf was the one from Star Trek. Now, Worf, I don't like Worf anymore because Worf was kind of distant, and he was just kind of busy and just worried about his next thing. Data, I've always liked.
Yes.
And him and I had a great conversation. He didn't care who was in the line. He was like, all right, you gave me money, I'm going to talk to you for, sign your autograph. But I asked Worf, I can't remember his name, so forgive me. Maybe that's why he doesn't like me. But I asked Worf a very basic question. I said, what about the cynicism that's invaded sci-fi? Like, if you look at what Star Trek used to be with James Kirk, the colors, these soft colors on the women, and it's like Earth is somewhat of a utopia society, even though it's not perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect, but Earth is somewhat of utopia. And, this cosmopolitan thing of going out into the stars, Earth has gotten its stuff together. All the societies and the cultures are represented on that ship, and they are literally going out into the Earth, into the cosmos. But Earth itself has gotten its affairs in order, be it climate, be it ecological, be it human beings from the standpoint of economics, all those things, for the most part, all intents and purposes, been settled. And I asked them, I was like, what about the cynicism that has invaded our sci-fi? Because, Star Trek wasn't meant to be that way. Like, Star Trek was meant to be this grand thing of expansive humanism, of cosmopolitanism in space. And now if you look at it, things are blowing up. People are having karate fights. You're having all sorts of chaos. It's all full of wars. Deep Space Nine was literally embroiled in a war for the last 2 seasons.
Commercialization.
Don't get me wrong, it was good though. I mean, Deep Space Nine, at least it worked. Yeah, it was entertaining. And Deep Space Nine, it worked because they built it up. It took 6 or 7 seasons to build up, and you understood how. And Deep Space Nine just asks a very good question, so I don't mind that. More so of what happens when this cosmopolitan society meets somebody who's not cosmopolitan. What happens when because just because you want the best of things doesn't necessarily mean it works out that way. You can make a choice for somebody where you, let's say, liberate their country, and they turn around and they enslave another population. You're like, wait a minute, I just liberated your country. What are you doing? Just because you do right doesn't mean right follows. Foreign policy, it doesn't work that way. Just because Star Trek is going out with this expansive humanism doesn't necessarily mean other societies or cultures or civilizations even know what that is, or even have that rule set as regards to morals and that type of stuff. It may not apply. So what does it look like when you encounter something else? I don't know. I'm fascinated by it because the critique of the culture thing, I would be interested to see how that applies in sci-fi, because sci-fi is just a reflection of our current society.
I'll have to ask her. I've got her email. I'll ask her. If she
Put a bug in her ear.
Yeah.
It dragged me on because I would love to have
You
the
might
conversation
enjoy
with her.
talking to her. Yeah.
I would love to have the conversation. I am a Trekkie, man. I'm a Trekkie, to say the least. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for trying to find a culture that works, even if you find it in a book.
Yeah.
We know we can do a lot better than we're doing now. We're not sure exactly who's got the right answer, but we're quite sure we're not there at the moment.
I think at the very least, though, we can kind of have this notion of moving in a direction. You know what I mean? Like,
I like that. Yeah.
like, I don't know what all of us, we're born and raised in the system. And oftentimes what we consider to be human beings, it's not really human beings per se, it's mostly human beings in a system. It's not like, what is human nature? Well, human nature is water in a glass for all intents and purposes. If human beings were, for example, if you were born on planet Vulcan, how would you act? Well, you probably act like a Vulcan.
Yeah.
If I was raised in China back during the Japanese or the samurai era, I would probably be a samurai. Or whatever the flexibility it is within the context of my personality will be, funneled through that. Mm-hmm. We're not just absolutes as something. We're something in something else. Human beings are never pulled out of the situation. You're always somewhere, and you're always interacting and engaging in some particular environment, and that environment has a massive influence on who you are and who you turn out to be, how you act. Mm-hmm. I guess that's my point. It's this not like oftentimes we say, well, it's human nature. Well, human nature is glass and water and glass. It's human nature in the sense of a capitalistic system, yes, or it's human nature in our system, yes. But what does it look like in a different world? Like if there was no poverty, what does it look like? Is there the same amount of crime if there's no poverty? I would say the answer is no. If people had the ability to go to school to the degree they wanted to go to school without having $50,000 of debt, do those people have less stress and chaos in their life in that process? And ergo, do those people have less mental issues associated in our society? I think the answer is yes. I mean, you go down the line in regards to what would be less chaotic. You know, not necessarily that you have an endpoint, because I have no idea what the endpoint looks like.
No, it's you'll never really reach it. It's a matter of getting the process right.
Yeah, right.
So keep as much as you can while you're going forward.
Moving in a direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, from my standpoint, I would say everybody should have healthcare. And you know, just I don't think there's any negative from that outside of maybe a negative in the sense, okay, well, how do you pay for it? How do you cover it? How do you make sure this works? That type of stuff.
I think it's a fallacy of pretending that a market is going to give you an ideal society, and it doesn't.
Yeah, it's not.
The market gives you a market. And then if you start tweaking the market, all bets are off because you no longer have a market.
Yeah.
When you take favorites, right now we're playing favorites with the fossil fuel industry. Dominion is a good example. They've stopped solar in the state, held it down to less than 1%. It would have taken over the state by now. We would all have better jobs. We're using less power, but Dominion wouldn't be making as much money. And this is sad because they're the principal, the only monopoly for power in this whole state area, the whole East Coast. And they're able to control the policy because of politicians. I won't call them corrupt, but I'll call them friendly to business rather than friendly to the actual citizens.
Well, you won't call them corrupt. I will.
All right.
And if you want, I mean, call it what it is. I mean, I say that to say you have scientists have said you have 12 years left to get your house in order. And saying you have 12 years left to get your house in order, you would think that after hearing that, you know, people would be like, okay, we need to do something about this. This is somewhat of a big deal. China has their solar power to the point where it's less than coal, like gasoline. It's they've been able to expand solar power to massive degrees. Whereas, like you say, here in Richmond, what's the hedge? Like, what's the disincentive to have something that will be better off for the environment and, again, jobs and everything else that could be that's associated with it, this kind of transition? It sounds like corruption.
Well, it's definitely not taking the big picture into account. Yeah. I guess you have to say it's possible to constrain growth in your direction in favor of your own particular side, but it doesn't mean it's the best thing for the population.
But those aren't population-based ideas. Those are things based on their own, like if you were Dominion Power and you had a monopoly, would you give that monopoly up? And if so, why? Especially if your job was to maximize your profit.
No, you wouldn't, and that's the problem with the arrangement. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no situation we do that. Like, there's no reason to do it. There's nothing. Like, if your job, if your ability to make profit is stuck in an industry that is rather bad, and there are other industries that might be better, so what? You know, my job is to make cash. My job is not the larger points of society.
It's a systemic corruption. Yeah. It's not individual. I think the people at Dominion, they're all probably wonderful people, but the machine is like Philip Morris, you know. Yeah. People had to die for them to make a profit. So they kept on making cigarettes as fast as they could, as long as they could.
Yes.
And people had to die for them to make money. Well, I'm sorry, that's too bad. We're doing business.
I'm pretty sure they're pleasant people who are working at the cigarette factory, who makes those cancer sticks. Yes. But that's kind of besides the point. They're still making cancer sticks. I mean, or coal. I mean, you could say they're about West Virginia. And look, I'm not one of those people who are like, they just stop. I think that's not look, I think part of the problem is, and the reason why West Virginia has trended so far to Republican is because Republicans protect coal. And the thing is, Democrats have been willing to transition without protecting those groups. Like there's no reason, none, where people in West Virginia should be like at 48th percentile in regards to poverty. None. That place have been an energy producer.
Generating money for a century.
Yes. Yeah. And I would argue that, look, the resources of our country should be used for the people of the country, or at the very least, there should be a kickback for those people in using those resources. You're talking about, oil, gas, coal. You're even talking about the investments into like the internet, electricity facilities, all of these things that we as a society dump money into, but see nothing back from, no kickbacks. If a company opens the door for you, they're going to charge you a nickel for opening the door. By the same token, if the government dumps millions or billions of dollars into the internet, there is no kickback from that. And not just no kickback. They will go over here and they will start saying, all right, we need to put constraints on the internet so these companies can make more cash and they can throttle this person and you can pay more for this particular thing. Like, so not only do we have to pay in order to create this particular entity, now we have to pay on top of the entity after it's created. It's extraordinary. Like, if you're going to make the argument, there should be a kickback for usage of government services. Meaning, if you're going to use our oil, if you're going to pull that out of the ground, if you're going to use our coal, fair enough, you pull it out of the ground, there should be a kickback to the people of that state, kind of like Alaska, where Sarah Palin was like 70% in Alaska. Why? Because Sarah Palin was working for these guys to get a kickback to everybody who's in Alaska for the oil that's in Alaska. I'm saying that should be an absolute, whether it's oil, gas, coal, or if there's any investment into various technologies in the society itself. The society should be able to get a kickback for the things society invests in, and that money should come back as a dividend to every human being in this country. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just saying.
Yes, well, it's definitely true that there's a lot being taken out of the earth and out of our collective environment that goes into private pockets and doesn't really benefit the collective.
Yes,
and I think you could say climate change is a case in point. Canada and other countries have tried to put a price on carbon because use of carbon and making carbon free to produce is really at the root of the problem. Capitalism will never work unless you have a balanced market, because we take all the side effects, you might call, when you make
externalities.
That's
negative externalities.
Yes, when you take them out of the equation, it looks really rosy.
Yeah.
But like right now, they want to frack. Now, if you made them responsible for the groundwater and for the water that people they're fracking around, and we have a lot of issues with that, and
earthquakes
and all the other things, if you put those in the equation, fracking is no longer viable.
It doesn't look as good.
No.
Even one more thing, the biohabitat loss. You know, the UN, the inspectors, these guys have been freaking out. And one of the reports came out, they was like, they didn't use the term extinction, but they had to bend over backwards not to use the term extinction events, meaning all of these animal species and insects that have been dying off. And even the climate thing, I still say these guys are like, you have 12 years left. And not necessarily you guys are going to die in 12 years, but more so you have 12 years to get your house in order before it gets to the point of, you know.
Reversibility will become more difficult.
Yes.
And we'll have to live with a lot less shoreline.
Yes.
If the water goes up even a couple of feet, that'll cause millions of people to move. And
by the way, if you don't believe me, believe Donald Trump. Because in Donald Trump's own report, by 2100, the temperature is going up by like 9 degrees. Think about that. His own report. Like, so like even his own scientists are like, yeah, this is pretty bad. Their response though is, there's nothing we can do about it at this point, so we might as well keep it moving. That's astonishing.
That's the real cynical.
It is.
But you know, it's that mindlessness, and this is the downside of capitalism. When it blinds people to the point that they can't see down the road past the next quarter when they make their dividends, then you know that group of people is actually, I think, definitionally insane.
They're insane from the larger context. Like if you're thinking about it from just an individual needs type thing. I have $20 million in the bank. I have a private jet. I can get from point A to point B. I don't have to deal with the plebes. My world looks rosy. This golf course looks perfectly okay. This resort looks perfectly fine. I don't see this water issue. I don't know what these people are freaking out about. And by the way, if I do anything, it's going to adversely affect my bottom line, which is going to adversely affect the way my life is living. So let's just keep this moving. And at some point, I'm not going to be here, and that's a problem for other people on the planet. Now, you can say it's functionally insane from that level. And by the way, the capitalism thing, you're right. The amount from a capitalistic standpoint, meaning from a evaluation standpoint, it may be better off to take banana or let's say oranges and port them from China to Florida, because it may be cheaper to do it that way, because the boat trip may not be as expensive as it may be to make some in California and everything else. However, from an environmental standpoint, that's utterly insane, because you can grow oranges in Florida. Like, it's that type of calculation where people get involved in, where it's like the environment is not taken into account when the metrics are being made. There are all sorts of negative externalities, like carbon. The carbon that's in the atmosphere. These guys are saying 12 years left. It wasn't for anything that people were doing in a natural way. It's from most of the, these companies, like oil companies, oil and gas, or animal agriculture. Like 50% is oil and gas, 50% is agriculture. Those are companies that seek to maximize their profit, doing really horrendous things if you're talking about animal ag. So much so where they don't even want you to videotape what goes on in those places because of how destructive, disturbing it is. They're ashamed of it. And so you get these two major industries who seek to maximize their profit at the expense of the planet. Now, logically, you could say, okay, guys, you need to change your industry. Who's going to do that? Nobody's going to do that.
Yeah.
And oil and gas will fight tooth and nail to stop you from doing either solar or some other industry that will adversely affect its own industry, missing the point that it does destroy the planet.
You know, it reminds me of the popular idea of a zombie is somebody in power who takes what might be considered, they act outside of any interest in life. They've sort of subsumed life to their own interests. And I don't know, in a society that's based on human beings, I mean, we're not based on money in the bank, we're based on people and generating capital. And it seemed like it's a real stretch to say that my income trumps all of the world's needs.
That's astonishing, right? Think about that for the moment. But that is the rule. I mean, the billionaire would step over, or the millionaire would step over.
Epstein is a good
homeless
example.
person.
Jeffrey Epstein is a good case in point.
Yeah.
He has, I don't know, $1 billion. And what does he do? He seeks out little girls, some less.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, I don't know what books he read or what nation he was a part of, but he totally missed that there was anybody in the world besides him. Just totally missed it. And I feel that, but anybody who says, I'll take another million, if I have to screw 50 million people to get it, that's fine. That's business. I'm just doing my job.
Well, from it, they say, we earned it. That's what they'll say. I earned it.
Mm-hmm. I did nothing wrong.
I did nothing wrong. The system itself kind of warps people into this notion that it doesn't matter how you earn it, as long as you earn it. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, you realize that's more of a systemic thing. I mean, when you look outside the system, you kind of ask whether or not 95% of the wealth should go to the top 1%. Like whether or not an individual person earns it or not. When you look at it from that sense, you say, well, wait a minute, 3 people have 50% of the wealth in the country? That's insane. And even if they did, quote unquote, earn it, what about a system that has allowed something like that to take place?
Well, I guess, my thing would be, does it work?
Well, it depends on what you mean by work. It works to make people rich.
It does, but it's very short term. The richer the people get, the more gated the cities are going to be, and the more difficult it will be to have stability in society. And that's not a stable system. I guess you're right. It's possible to think, but my gated community trumps all of your desperate hunger.
Yes, because I don't see your desperate hunger. Nor do I have to deal with it. I mean, the homeless person that gets stepped over by the billionaire to get into his car.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, gets out of his car, steps over the homeless person. But a homeless person is somebody else's responsibility. And the state is supposed to be taking care of that. And I got my billions of dollars, I got my millions of dollars, and that's not really my issue. That's not really my problem.
Yes,
I feel bad for the guy, but I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, here's $1, that type of stuff. The moment that you have a conversation with somebody who's just fabulously rich and they say we should be able to make as much money as we can possibly make, and you point out, well, you realize that you're not making that out of thin air. You're expropriating that from somebody else.
Well, yeah, you're not really earning it. You're taking it through legal processes.
Yes, through legal process.
And you pass the laws, so it's okay.
Yeah. But right, people like you help people like that.
You wrote the laws.
And I don't begrudge anybody for working and earning and all this stuff. Fair enough. My only issue is, there's a social contract of sorts. And in the context of the social contract, there are things that are required in order to keep our society up and running and moving and people healthy and everything else. And this notion of the rich just taking it from roughshod is nonsense to me. That doesn't flatter me. You can have your millions providing that people have health care, providing people can go to school. And those people aren't going to care about your millions if they have those things that allow society to exist as is. And that's not our current society.
You can look at many places. I'm thinking of the opioid crisis as well. It's a case where people made a lot of money, and for years, folks have been dying because of the amount of money they're making, because of the amount of drugs they're making that aren't really needed. And yet, even to this day, I don't know of anybody who's actually, there's been a few fines levied. There were a few, I think Oklahoma took the drug companies to task and got a big settlement. But the people who are making more drugs than are needed by legitimate medical use are still doing it. And the pharmacies are still providing it. And every day, another 100,000 people die from drug overdoses. I think it's something like that. And this could be stopped overnight if we said, my gosh, it's like cigarettes. We know your product kills, and we know because of the way you're marketing it, it kills more people. So the government should be able to say, what you're doing is killing people. Gosh, we should have some way to say, that's not okay. The AMA should step in and say it's not okay. The Doctors Association should be stepping up and say, the hospital should be saying, what's with this public health thing, letting people become addicted? I mean, there are so many things in society where we actually just turn a blind eye. Like for smoking, for years, we turned a blind eye. It took 50 years to get smoking. And I'm really amazed with the number of people dying that opioids hasn't gotten that much attention.
Well, you know, the wild part about that with the smoking thing, they had doctors.
Yeah.
They had doctors. Do you remember those commercials?
Oh,
Where the
yeah.
doctors would come out
9
and be
out
like,
of 10 doctors who smoke
yeah,
prefer Chesterfield. Yeah.
yeah, I love those.
Smoother. And they're mild.
Those things are amazing. I was always fascinated by those commercials, especially when I used to look at them in the old days. And you would, like, the doctor would just take his Camel cigarette, take his puff.
In the ads. Yeah.
You know, so it's funny. I agree with you and I disagree with you, at least on the opioid thing. I think I mostly agree. My only issue with the opioid thing is there are people who actually need pain meds.
Sure.
Like, and who need pain meds.
Oh, no, I'm fine with that.
And it's like they've terrified the doctors to such an extent where the doctors don't want to give people pain meds who actually need pain meds. And so it's like, you have some suicides that people have been committing because they can't deal with, you know, and the doctors are like, oh, I'm terrified the feds are watching me, the feds are watching me. In which case it like adversely impacts, you know, they get dicey. But you're right. They let these guys, for the most part, advertise and sell to, you know, it's like you're selling to the press or to the public. But what does the public know about the drugs that you're selling to them? It's like, go ask your doctor about this. Why? My doctor doesn't know? It's so strange.
I'm just thinking if people are dying in those numbers, surely somebody has an inkling how this is happening.
What do you mean? Like
like if we have a city where we have a spike in drug overdoses, we can say, gosh, what's going on in that city? You know,
yeah.
And we can take steps to deal with not just the corrupt doctors and the corrupt pharmacies, but what in the world is going on that all these people have despair in their lives, or they're being sold bad drugs? I mean, I don't know. But
let's start with the despair. I think you hit upon something. I mean, if, you know, I think sometimes we do drugs in order to kind of deal with certain problems, like diseases of despair. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, God, I am under this type of stress, or I'm under that type of stress. I have this particular bill, that type of bill. This person is ill, that person is ill. Like these things that are ultimately cultural, I would argue.
Yes, exactly.
That we try to deal with either through drugs or medication or something else to try to get from point A to point B. Yeah. Our society looks at each other as individuals, you know, as opposed to the fact that we're a collective society. And people function and deal with that stuff sometimes as individuals when really it's not an individual thing that's taking place. You know what I mean? Like that person not being able to make ends meet is not entirely an individual process. You know, whether the person is making wages or not, meaning that person could be working extremely hard, but they might be making $10 an hour, struggling to make ends meet, as opposed to a society that says, well, you're at least going to get $15, $16 an hour. Meaning, at the very least, your wages are met. You know, and those wages need to go further because the person has to pay their hospital bills and their education bills and their whatever for their parent that's ill. Like they're doing it on their own, and because they're completely alone and doing it on their own. But that's not an individual thing, even though the person thinks it's an individual thing. That's a society thing. In a different society, that person is fine. In this society, he is not, because that person has all sorts of stress that is on them. Like we don't look at this stuff as stressors. Like we do look at the drug companies, and those drug companies are getting guys drugs. But why is the guy taking those drugs? Why? You know, like it's not as straightforward.
No, I agree. That's what I mean by there being a cycle that we should understand, and we should deal with the cycle. And we shouldn't let things go on for 10 years and then suddenly say, wow, this has been going on for 10 years. We should be able to say, we have a problem, and we collectively need to answer it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, smoking was a totally self-induced tragedy, you know, but a lot of the dysfunction people seem to be under is really kind of not necessary, or maybe systemic.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And the fact that we let it go on for as long as we do is a criticism of us.
You know, that's, God, man, this is an interesting conversation. You know, this notion of individual choice.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when a person takes a cigarette, they start smoking, let's say 16, 15 years old. They smoke for, let's say 20, 30 years, they get cancer, etc. They have medical bills and everything else. Was it an individual choice? Oh, that's just interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, the person would say, well, I made an individual choice. I chose to do this, but was it? I mean, nobody forced, society to have cigarettes. And other societies might have said, yeah, man, this causes cancer. We're not going to let this on the market. Who's going to put rat poison on the market?
Yeah.
And yet we do. But that individual says, I made an individual. It wasn't an individual choice. That's my point. There's all sorts of things that happen that we consider to be, this is entirely something that's of me. And oftentimes it is not. It is a societal thing that's allowed where the person takes it on their own. Smoking is a really good point. Like, who smokes? If smokes aren't on the market.
Yeah, you're not born with it.
You're not born smoking.
Somebody convinced you to do it.
And even if you do it for yourself, at a point where you're addicted to it, you're kind of stuck.
Yes, who's in charge anymore?
Yeah, right. You're not in charge anymore.
Yeah.
Like, choice is a funny thing. I mean, just because somebody makes a choice, what went into making a choice in and of itself? Like, Bob decides to do whatever, and somebody comes up and says, "Why did Bob do that?" And then the question, well, that is a good question. Why did Bob do that? What went into Bob's upbringing? What into Bob's society, culture that got Bob where he weighed and measured things to, like, for example, when I often say that Jack Fresco and what's his name? Jack Fresco and James Baldwin, some of these guys have really not necessarily changed the decisions that I make, but more so the way I weigh the world. Like the way you look at a particular thing and you would weigh that thing in a way that you didn't do it before. Your choices are going to be derived from the way you weigh those things. And if, you know, how those things are dramatically impacted when you're younger, then I would say the dramatic impact of those things is not necessarily an entirely individual choice. It's a choice made out by the society and some, you know, collaboration of who you are and to making those things. We never put society on stand when things happen. It's always just the individual. I always find that to be weird.
Option structures are quite different from different people. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I mean, it really does. And speaking of that, Daniel Patello was fired. Daniel Patello.
Yes, the cop.
Pantaleo, I'm sorry.
Pantaleo. Yeah.
That's the cop that killed Eric Garner,
Strangled
him to death on the streets of New York. Now,
a lot of witnesses.
There were a lot of witnesses,
A lot
not to
of
mention
times
the
he said-
world,
Yeah.
you know, at that point was watching that. And I want you guys to hear something for the moment. This is this was happened at one of the Democratic debates. And this was notable because it became somewhat of a big deal.
Stand by, Senator.
I will stand by.
Please stand by.
This was a good example the other day of the Department of Justice not going after Officer Pantaleo. That, you know, Officer Pantaleo used a chokehold that was prohibited by NYPD. He did that for 7 seconds, 11 different times. Eric Garner said that he couldn't breathe. He knew what he was doing, that he was killing Eric Garner, and yet he has not been brought to justice. That police officer should be off the street.
All right. So what you're hearing, and I don't think what you're hearing is effectively Bill de Blasio being shamed because they're saying fire Pantaleo. That's what they're screaming in the audience. Fire Pantaleo, fire Pantaleo. They're screaming that because Bill de Blasio wouldn't fire Pantaleo, and he kept acting like he didn't have the ability to do so. The New York commissioner comes out, and finally, he does just that. He fires Pantaleo. Now, not just fires Pantaleo, he comes out and he gives a speech. And I got to be honest, I am not a fan of this speech at all, and that's to put it mildly. Because he goes through, it's almost like he's a fence attorney for the cop.
Yeah, apologizing.
Yeah, it's almost like he's apologizing for the cop to some degree, and almost like blaming the victim in this process. A man is strangled to death on the streets of New York City for loose cigarettes. And even if you believe that, you know, whites have a tendency to say, oh, you should have just followed the law, you should have just followed the law. Well, you're not being harassed 30 times by the cops. And I got to be honest. I mean, there's something to say about, even if you think that, you know, he should have just put his head down and, you know, and went along. Even if you think that, do you honestly believe that a guy should be strangled to death for selling loose cigarettes? Does that, you know, and even at worst, like, you know, at the worst case scenario, is this the way that you deal with the situation? Putting a person in an illegal chokehold and strangling them to death. That cop, Pantaleo, was able to get money for the last, 5 years, being on desk duty. He strangled a man to death with an illegal chokehold. And even if you're saying, okay, look, that guy should just follow the law. I mean, they always say that. That guy should just follow orders. But it's still an illegal chokehold. Does that not matter? I mean, if Batman takes the bad guy, nobody's concerned that Batman does that. They give Batman a pass. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man gets a pass when he's out there web slinging. He's a vigilante, technically, but fair game. But if Batman kills somebody, Batman's going to jail. Because Batman shouldn't have been out there being a vigilante in the first place. And I still say You're talking about a guy who's selling loose cigarettes. This is the issue of class, even though it looks like an issue of race. And I say it's an issue of class because nobody in their right mind wants to be selling loose cigarettes. Nobody is getting rich off of that loose cigarette money. This money from these 25-cent cigarettes. Yeah. Nobody does that. Meaning if he's out there selling loosies, he's doing that because he's trying to make extra cash. If somebody had ends meet, they're not selling loose cigarettes. He's never out there. Pantaleo may be a maniac, but Pantaleo is going to strangle somebody else to death, but not that guy, because that guy is not going to be on the streets selling loose cigarettes. That's an issue of class. You know, when Bill Gates has $120 billion, Bill Gates had, let's say, $120 billion, or let's say $110 billion. Maybe Gardner's not on the street. You know what I mean? Like it's but the cop gets, you know, the cops. The cop, he gets fired. Now, this is the police commissioner who comes out in this case, and this is him talking right now.
He should have decided against resisting arrest, but...
Yeah, of course they had to go in. Of course they had to go in. Essentially.
The Commissioner of Trials Legal Authority has now lost his chosen career. Tragedy. And a hardworking police officer with a family, a man who took this job to do good, to make a difference in his home community, has now lost his chosen career. And that is a different kind of tragedy. In this case, the unintended consequence of Mr. Garner's death must have a consequence of its own. Therefore, I agree with the Deputy Commissioner of Trials' legal findings and recommendations. It is clear that Daniel Pantaleo can no longer effectively serve as a New York City police officer.
Pantaleo's fired.
For not being effective.
Well, and for the legal chokehold. Not to mention he was being deceptive when they were asking him questions about it.
Apparently he lied about that.
He did lie, yeah. He's a cop. That's what you say, what it is. I mean, well, yeah, he was being dishonest when they were questioning about it, which is wild since everybody could just watch the video and see him choke the guy to death. I mean, come on. You have 5 cops around, 4 or 5 cops.
It was more like,
I mean, it was a ton of cops. Yeah. And the guy is honorary. He's annoyed because they've been locked up. You know, he'd been harassed like 30 times or something. And, you know, is there any ability to not do that? Like, you know, is really the answer is that the only thing that we could do in this situation was strangle this man to death. That's all we could do. And he goes here and says, Garner probably didn't know whether his heart was going to give out. Nobody thinks that they're going to be choked to death. So nobody thinks whether or not their heart is going to give out if they get choked to death by the cops. And man, I was talking to this cop, but I had no idea that my heart was going to give out if he puts me in an illegal chokehold. Who knew? Who knew that? Who knew that? My mom, maybe that's what my mom was concerned about. I was, my dog got out one day, Bo. I have 2 dogs. I have a rescue pit bull. He's like 70-pound lap dog. Nicest thing on the planet, but he is a lap dog, and he gets ornery because he's a lap dog. Yeah, he's a lap dog. And Pitsu, who's a Shih Tzu pit bull mix. Bo gets out. Bo is not the brightest bulb in the world, and he doesn't have a huge amount of energy, so he can run for a little bit, then he gets tired, and he wants to come back home. He doesn't know what his house looks like. And he goes standing in front of the door of another woman and freaks her out. Freaks her out big time, and she's because he's like honorary. Yeah, he's like, why aren't you letting me in the house? He's like, he's pissed off, and so she called the cops. Now we go looking for Bo. I find Bo because I just followed the cop car at that point, because I figured the cop car was going for him. Wow. And now he's a complete prick right off the bat. Yeah. Doesn't have to be. I'm apologetic. I'm like, I'm sorry. Please tell her I'm sorry. Stay back. He's like screaming like a maniac, and I'm like, all right. He's like, is that your dog? Yes, that's my dog. You're terrified of the dog? No, I'm not scared of the dog. I open the door to book us in. And so he follows me to the house. And he's like, where's your papers? Where's your paperwork? So my wife gets him the paperwork. And I'm trying to explain to him, look, please tell that woman I'm sorry. And he's like, and she's like, well, the dog chased her down. I was like, well, I don't know if the dog chased her down. What are you trying to spin the story? Well, A, you weren't there, so you didn't see it. So B, you're just giving a narrative. And I'm trying to make the point to him that I'm sorry. Please get across to her that I'm sorry. He doesn't want to hear any of that. The only thing he wants to do is complain. And my point is, it's like, if the person's already being apologetic, you don't have to act that way. Mm-hmm. And the picture is the problem with cops is all of them act that way. Every cop I've ever interacted with has acted that particular way. They've always been pricks, whether they're at the airport, whether they're not. Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you're like, dude, I'm sorry. and he's like, well, the dog chased her down. I was like, well, I don't know if the dog chased her down. I mean, maybe. I mean, if it's a 70-pound dog, anything that he does is going to look like he's going after her. Why are you trying to spin the story? I'm not trying to spin the story. It's just a common sense thing. If it's a dog, he's 70 pounds. It's a pit bull. If he's even jiding behind you, it looks like, oh my God, the dog's chasing me down. It's just common sense. And he gets into this thing where my mom starts freaking out. Now, my mom might have thought, oh my God, he's going to strangle and shoot my kid because he's a cop. And cops act their way towards people of a particular intent. I guess my point is this. There is something to say about not being a maniac and to be able to de-escalate a situation as opposed to immediately jumping to the perspective of, I need to choke this man to death. It's insane. Why are you doing that? Like, even if he's being honorary, is the response really, I need to choke him to death? That just seems so bizarre to me. Like, as a response. He even says, we would have given him a citation. Why didn't you just give him the citation? Just give him a citation. Like, sir, I need you to move along. You can't be selling Lucy's out here. Yeah, man, I mean, you guys are always harassing me. I get that. Look, here's a ticket. Go with your business. Like, this just seems so extreme. Like, even if you believe that he should have did whatever, is the response to that really that it is okay to murder a man on the streets of New York in cold blood and have that cop just walk off like nothing happened? He's got paid 4 years.
Yeah. There's a whole backstory to that, actually, but it's kind of material that the cop was having a dialogue with him, and he kind of ignored him and asked the cop questions. Yeah. So it's obvious there's a very adversarial relationship. Probably
it is.
Not like the one you had.
Yeah.
In this adversarial relationship, somebody trains these cops, or they just get really weird people to be cops.
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's two things. I think the people who you put on for that job are maniacs. I mean, honestly, I say that to say it's like the bullies that used to be in the school, the people who have authority issues, who want to be in charge, and you find these people to put them in and give them a badge. And so these angry maniacs get the opportunity to be in a position of authority where they can essentially exert that authority in various population. There are also issues where some of them, let's be honest, are not necessarily the best people. I mean, that's not all of them. So don't misunderstand me. I assume a few are good people, to take a word from Trump. But there is something wrong in the way that they either train these guys or the people that they choose for these jobs. Because I got to be honest, man, these people are maniacs. I can do a story where I can do 100 different items where cops are either beating, abusing, injuring, or doing, something they have no business doing. It's not, it's African Americans want to be able to call the cops also. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not like a situation where, the adversarial relationship is because there's an adversarial relationship. African Americans would also like to be able to call the cops when things go wrong or when something is off or something to that effect. But that is not the reality to which we have. And I have to be honest, I watch that video and you look at that video and you think to yourself, he was honorary, yeah, but does that mean he needs to die? And you look, that homeless guy or the guy who had mental illness.
They were shot in town.
They were shot. I mean, the guy's like literally laying on the ground, dying, and they're laughing at him as he dies. Like, I understand that they're, it may be a difficult job, so don't misunderstand me. And I totally get that it's not everybody. I'm being coy when I make the joke about Trump and everything else. There are some people who get that job who believe I'm going to do this for the best, full stop.
So long as your job doesn't pay that well.
But you get perks. That perk is authority.
Yeah.
That perk is authority. I mean, honestly, that's a perk. So my issue is basic. There should be something from the standpoint of being able to bring down hysteria, whether that's dealing with somebody who's freaking out, whether that's dealing with a 12-year-old like Tamir Rice that gets shot like in 2 seconds as soon as the cop gets out the car. I don't even think it goes 2 seconds. Or the guy in Walmart who's playing with a toy gun and gets shot when he's playing with like a BB gun or something in Walmart. They shoot him within 2 or 3 seconds. Whereas the other guy walks in the Walmart, white, comes in with a body armor, with a gun, and the fire says, "Are you the guy who's with the body? Are you the guy who's just in Walmart?" Guy, so he has body armor. I was like, "Are you the guy with a?" And he pulls out his gun. He's like, "Brace!" Now, think about this for the moment. Yeah. I'm not being unfair when I say this. And like the guy who's in Walmart is playing with a BB gun or toy gun and gets shot within a few seconds. Tamir Rice is playing with a toy gun, completely toy gun. The cop
he's 12 years old.
12 years old. Cop barely even gets out the cop before he kills him. And again, you can go down the list with this. In this case, this guy gets strangled to death on the streets of New York, screaming, "I can't breathe." Yeah. Screaming, "I can't breathe," in front of some of witnesses. The one who spit at the cop and got slammed the other day. And I'm like, you shouldn't have spit at the cop. That's atrocious. That's gross. And that's disgusting. And yeah, they should have stopped you, and they should have gave you a talking to. Yeah, that's definitely worth a ticket. But should you slam the person down with 4 cops standing on the person's head with 4 or 5 other cops hovering around with people screaming at them saying, you guys are shameful, because they were shameful. Like, these guys are protectors of power in many respects, and they themselves tend to be, just bring it down. Everything doesn't have to be historical, It doesn't have to be historical. That guy should be alive. And, I say that as a class issue. More than anything else, he should be alive. There should not be a situation where this should happen.
Well, I think somebody somewhere is training these guys.
They are. Do you remember the Baltimore thing where the guy got murdered in Ohio? The cop killed the guy in Ohio and in Baltimore. And I think Obama was in office at the time. And Obama got, what's his name, to go out and do a profile. It was like a report on the cops in Baltimore and Ohio. And it was the same report. Like the report came out the same thing. These people tend to focus on certain areas and certain neighborhoods, and there started to be certain attitudes that were in with the police station and that type of stuff. It was systemic. It wasn't a bad apple like that was. It was systemic, the problem with the way they're trained and the way that they behave and the way they go about it. I don't know how you fix that. Like, is that an issue of training? Is that an issue of trying to bring the hysteria down in the way they interact with people? Is that community policing? In the sense that somebody who doesn't look like me is more terrified of me because they don't look like me? These kind of racial attitudes of sorts. I don't know what that is, and I don't necessarily know how you fix it. I would say that, if African Americans are edgy dealing with cops, they aren't that way for no reason. And, it's not because, they're seeing something on YouTube or Twitter. No, it's a history of it. That is understood history of it, and you don't have to look far to see it.
Yeah, there's a source of shame up there in the power structure somewhere that will have problems like this until that diminishes, until somebody somewhere who wants a race war, is pushed out of their power structure, because this stuff doesn't happen. It doesn't just happen. It's too consistent. There are too many patterns to it.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not just black and white. I mean, it may happen more so from the standpoint of African Americans. I think it's like 4 times often or something like that to be locked up by a pot and that type of stuff. But I tell my white brethren, skin is not a protectant. Like it's one of like that guy who died, on the grass. Where the cops are laughing at him. He was white. He was, and the guy in Richmond the other day that got killed. And then the other day, this was like maybe last year, where they went to the house and killed the guy. That guy was white. I mean, it's not a.
I missed that one.
I could have swore this was in Richmond, but it's not entirely a race thing. I mean, it may happen more prevalent, but it's.
No, I think you're right. Property is probably the biggest thing with that.
Yeah.
Protecting that property.
Yeah, and authority. I mean, they're like the individual thing of authority. Mm-hmm. Like they shot the guy's dog. And then the guy's pissed off because he shot his dog, and the cop's like, "What do I care? No, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to touch me. You complain, but that's all you can do." Like it's this notion of authority. I think the issue is authority. They have too much authority without having any way to make sure that authority is under curtail or under oversight. And until that oversight takes place, nothing happens.
Yes.
Every cop should wear a monitor, I think.
A what?
A camera. Yeah.
And it should be on all the time. Yeah. And if they want to use locker room talk, that's fine. We'll accept it, because we know that they're actually, when you monitor, Julius, you're more honest, I think.
I think so too. Yeah. I think so too. At the very least, somebody can look up and see, okay, what happened? What happened? I don't have to take your word for it. I can actually just look at the video. If that video for what's his name wasn't taken, do you honestly believe what's his name be fired? Pantaleo? Pantaleo would not lose his job if that wasn't a video of that.
And that was followed by the thing in St. Louis.
Yeah.
In Missouri.
Yeah.
So that's why all of a sudden this Black Lives Matter sort of erupted out of that.
Yeah.
Because chain after chain after chain. But I really, at the risk of sounding conspiratorial, somebody up there wants to piss off people.
You think so?
Well, it's too consistent. Somebody who trains the police, the white police, but particularly, wants to piss off people. Can I say piss off on the air?
I think so. I think so. I don't know if they want to. I mean, I don't know if they. I honestly think it's, if you're training somebody, you say your job, you need to control the space. You need to control the space. No matter what happens, you got to control your space. And so it becomes this person is like flipping out now because they got to control their space. And I think they're terrified. I think they're perpetually scared.
Well, they should be trained past terrification. I mean, that's why you pick people to be cops, because they can handle the heat. You know, they can say, the guy looks really dangerous. Okay, I took the job. I'll deal instead of well, let's just kill them all and see if they're innocent afterwards. You know?
It's weird. I remember one of the things that Bill Maher said that I did like. He kind of made this point that the moment that you decide to be a cop, you can't. This notion that everybody else's life is less important than your own. You know what I mean? It's like you're out there. You're like, all right, I need to make sure I get home tonight. So if anything goes down, watch out. Watch out. Everybody's on notice.
This thing is loaded.
Yeah, this thing is loaded. I have a wife and kid at home. I got to do everything I can to get home, regardless of what takes place, which means that you need to be very careful around me. Yeah. I mean, when they threw that kid down, did you see when they threw that little girl down, that young girl down? It's like 13-year-old. The cop throws the girl down, pulls his gun out, and he's like flipping out a bunch of kids. Like this happened maybe a couple of months ago. Like this stuff is extraordinary. Like I gotta be honest, between dealing with cops and not, or dealing with cops and dealing with like criminals, to some degree, rather deal with crooks. At the very least, you can defend yourself without going to prison. Like it's that type of stuff, and that's sad, and it shouldn't be that way. Honestly, it shouldn't be that way.
No, I hope you've gone to the police board with your story, so they can begin to think about it.
They're not thinking about that stuff. They don't care about that stuff.
I know they're not, but I'm saying, well, anyway, we should make a show of it.
It'll be an interesting show.
We need people to be on the same page. I mean, we pay the cops to police us, right? Now, I don't know what it says on the side of the doors of Richmond, but in LA it said to protect and to serve. And I took that seriously.
I didn't.
Well,
I never took that seriously.
What's about you, huh?
I mean, have you dealt with cops? I mean, the moment, look, I've led a straight arrow life, as an absolute, to be serious. And even I don't like dealing with the cops. Yeah. Because it's like they're maniacs. And I'm sorry, they have this anger management thing that's problematic. I mean, and so it's not like dealing with a regular person. It's dealing with a person that had this weird thing in their head of, I must maintain authority. And it's like, oh, dude, back away. Like I don't want to deal with you or somebody else. And then it's this belief in themselves that's not founded. So they would be like the guy who they shot, who they said, well, he looked suspicious. What do you mean? Because he walked in this room and it's like they shot him like 50 times. Do you remember this? This was in New York. A Dule or whatever his name is. They put like 50 bullets in the guy.
In the stairwell.
Yeah, and he looked suspicious. He looked suspicious. He looked at us. And when he looked at us, we just figured when he looked at us, he was doing something wrong. That guy in his head was so confident in his abilities that didn't exist that he was willing to literally go and harass somebody that wasn't doing anything wrong. That type of stuff. Like they have suspicions. They know stuff behind the scenes. Yeah. They have magic powers.
Well, there's a show on that, but we haven't got time for it now.
Yeah, we had to end this. I wanted to get. We ended up talking about other stuff, but nevertheless, we can end this here, guys. This is WRWK LP 93.9 FM. It is community radio. Building a bridge, even though I was ranting on that particular one, so forgive me, and I wasn't a bridge per se. But the Work FM. We are looking for underwriters for the show. So if you guys enjoy this content and you find yourself coming back to this channel often for any of these shows, be it Citizen Voices and Frequency of Hope with Stephanie, the Richmond Business Babes, I love that name, the Critique of Culture, which has to be a Star Trek episode, and I swear I will be on that show when it is.
And the Self-Care Activist.
And the Self-Care Activist. Not to mention, I want to give a shout out to Thrifty Quaker and also Affordable Home Inspection. Both of them assist in the maintaining of this show, and I want to thank them for their support.
You're here.
Excellent. All right, guys. I will see you guys tomorrow, with Tuesday, same drive time hour, 5 p.m.
Same drive time. All right. So, folks, we're going to go back to our loop. It's in progress, so pardon me if it seems a little mid-sentence. It might be. But I hope you've enjoyed the show, and there's more where this came from. Lord knows we have a lot of things to discuss. Could be just a little better, and maybe with your help, we can make them a little better. But without further ado, here goes the loop.
And we're gonna be the death of me.